Nice. You found it. Yeah. Nice.
Hi.
Oh. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Hey, and good morning.
So.
We have no counsel.
I know.
I don't think since Dwayne has already said he's not coming.
Anymore.
Yeah.
How are you, Laura?
And
Awesome today.
Celeste is going to call in.
For a Friday.
Celeste is calling in. No, Celeste is in person, she said.
Okay.
So she was coming up for it.
Herb, we probably have from. So in theory, if we have Celeste, we've got a quorum because we have 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So we've got essentially a quorum.
Celeste says she could see you at 9:15. And Herb is not coming. Okay.
All right, and Eric's in the airport, so. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Celeste.
Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to kick off the September meeting of the STEM Advancement Council. Welcome. We have Romana on the phone, one of our council members, and Celeste will be showing up at about 9:15. Lisa's here, Lisa Graham's here in person, and I'm here, Jim Pyro, and Mark Lewis is here in person. So why don't we just do some introductions in the room beyond just the council members, and Kyle, you want to just start so people know?
Sure. I'm Kyle Ritchie-Knoll with the Oregon Business Council.
Oh, my name is Luis Juarez with the Higher Education.
Okay.
Deb Bailey with ODE.
Yep.
Laura Foley, ODE. And Donna Brandt, ODE.
Thanks, Donna. And Romana, you're on the phone, right?
Yes, I am. Good morning, all.
Others on the phone we can see at least is Bella Cantor, Jerianne Abel, Julie Kenry, Mark Freed, Randy, and Shabaka McKay. So thank you all for participating. We've got a pretty full agenda and need to make some decisions on additional funding that we have to address going forward. So I'm going to turn over to Mark to give us an update on what things are going on, and we'll go from there.
All right. Good morning, and
Jim and Mark, this is Dwayne Johnson on the phone, too.
Hey, Dwayne.
Hey, Dwayne.
Fantastic. Good to have you join us. All right. Yeah, welcome, everyone. I want to start out by thanking all of the council members for their rapid response in approving the STEM Innovation Grant recommendations in this last round. We sent your recommendations forward through to Lindsay Capps and Salam Noor, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, or the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction in charge of ODE, and that has been all approved officially, and so the Department of Education is moving forward with those recommendations and grants. So thanks to the hard work also of Deb Bailey and Donna Brandt and the rest of the team over at the Department of Education, who is really making all of that happen behind the scenes here. I also want to update the council that just a short while, in the last week or the week before, the Oregon Community Foundation released an RFP related to career-connected learning. It's in your packets as an overview. It is in alignment with the goals of the STEM education plan, and as the council knows, those funds come from a settlement of the state of Oregon with Oracle. These are the Oracle STEM funds this RFP represents the first tranche of funds to go out through our STEM hubs. We anticipate that given timing with our RFP for new STEM hubs, that those communities that are currently STEM hubs and are aspirational STEM hubs are likely to be in a position to apply for these funds as well. So
Take it.
this went out through the hubs. Yep. And the due date will be November 1st for those. And that's really to incentivize greater connectivity between, as it says, career-connected learning, there's a whole continuum in that packet of what is meant by career-connected learning, anywhere from career awareness, career exploration, and career preparation is the primary foci of those funds for this round. Yeah, it is very exciting. So really pleased that that is happening, and the Oregon Community Foundation has been a fantastic partner in this work already. So looking forward to continuing to work with them as additional funds become available in different areas. As has been reported to this council previously, next to areas under consideration, not yet set in stone, would be support for out-of-school time programs, again with an emphasis on equity and access, similar to what we have been doing and supporting through the council STEM innovation grants, and then also working to support educator professional development and learning, inclusive of leadership. So those are still under consideration right now, so we don't have a timing, but those will be developed over the next couple of months, and we'll keep you updated. Yep. Continuing to look for, as some of the council seats have timed out, looking for new council members. So if people know of leaders in the state in different sectors, particularly we're looking in terms of getting geographic diversity, as well as some of the additional I guess, sector diversity, particularly in the health sciences and some of our precision agriculture and food processing. Those sorts of areas would be helpful to have those perspectives here amongst the council as well. So please let me know if you know leaders across the state, and anybody else who is online, if they have thoughts on that, please send those names to me, and I'll reach out and talk with those individuals. Let's see. I want to give a quick just update from the STEM Beyond Schools folks. We're still in the process of working with them, or the Department of Education is still in the process of working with all of the funded partners for reporting around their use of funds. But I received a quick update from Kristen Harrison around some of their preliminary outcomes, and I just wanted to share that with the council because I think it's really exciting. Not including some of their schools that have the greatest diversity, they are reporting with the support of ODE, they were able to get data that showed that 85% of the participants in those programs were met the criteria for underserved, underrepresented that we put out in the RFP. We expect that figure to go up as we pull in additional data, so that's super exciting. And then they've been working with the folks at OSU and the Center for Lifelong Learning in STEM. I think they've rebranded to some other name, but I can't remember it right now. But to do program assessment, and they were using some of the tools around STEM identity. So how do participants see themselves in relation to both academic achievement and future aspirations? And there was an extremely significant growth in STEM identity. I don't know what that means, by the way, so we'll wait for what the data means on that. But when a researcher says significant growth, it has meaning. A significant growth in STEM identity for those who began the programs with low STEM identity. So there was significant growth there. There was modest growth for those with a modest, sort of a middling STEM identity, and then it was you didn't see a tremendous growth for those who came in with a high STEM identity to begin with, but that's what we would expect and anticipate. So that was also exciting to see, and I'm working with them in regard to looking at how do we streamline those assessments. And again, we're having a meeting on the 21st of September with the STEM Hub and other partners to try to get coherency in regard to STEM assessments, assessment of learning, student identity, in regard to STEM and the programs that we have both in school and out of school. So that is on September 21st from 8 to 4 at the Viticulture. So any STEM council members who would like to participate in that conversation are very welcome to do so.
Where's it at?
It's at the Eola Viticulture Center here in Salem.
Okay.
On the way. It's a gorgeous location, and looking forward to bringing greater coherency around how we're measuring different outcomes. What are the outcomes that are most important for us to measure, and then how are we doing that in a way that enables us to tell a coherent and consistent story across multiple grantees. And this is also playing into with some of the Oracle funds coming online, there's a greater sense of need to ensure that we are on similar pages in regard to how we're looking at that and assessing that, and for what purposes.
You're going to take advantage of that opportunity to have OCF there to talk about?
Oh, absolutely. OCF is a critical partner in that, as well as some other folks from the philanthropic community will also be participating in those conversations. And from the after school for kids, Oregonians, as well as our STEM hubs and some additional researchers, some national names like Martin Storpsteek, who's been involved in this work at a national level around STEM assessment. So it should be a rich and complex conversation. It's a very complex conversation to have, but we're looking forward to moving that forward. And then finally, I would like to propose to the council around to give time to fill the vacant seats, and to, as we'll talk a little bit later about standing up advisory members for this council. I'd like to propose, and I also have a conflict on October 27th, so I'm proposing that we defer or reschedule that one, and either just not do it on that day and keep our next date, which I think is December, just after the leadership summit, to have that date, but then just to put it off and allow some of the work to go forward. There's also, just a lot of also vacancies in the Department of Education that we're working to fill, and RFPs to get out, and other work to move forward.
Mm-hmm. So maybe instead of that meeting, maybe you could just send out a kind of a memo updating us on what the status, things have happened during the last month, just to keep us in the loop of what's going on and progress that's being made.
Perfect. Okay. And there may be an opportunity for us to talk about some committee convening during that time period as well, to move forward on other work.
Okay.
All right. That's what I have.
Okay. All right. So thanks, Mark. Any questions for Mark by the council? Great progress.
Exciting to hear.
Yeah.
How stuff is
Very
progressing,
good.
and I like things. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, just saying it was very good.
Thanks, Romano.
And if there's any other questions, please let me know. Certainly, well, as we continue our conversation today. And then a major sort of update is our next agenda item, and that is welcoming of Laura Foley to the team as the State Director of CTE at the Oregon Department of Education. She comes to us, or to the department, with a wealth of experience, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more, but I'm really super excited that she's joined the team, and I've had a couple of conversations with her already, and I know that we're going to work very well together and productively.
Great.
So
Come on up.
join us and say a few words. Yeah.
I suggest you sit maybe over next to Lisa, next to the microphone, so I don't think so. Yeah. People on the phone. Welcome. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I'm pretty excited about all of this. It's awesome. So,
It's early days.
People tell me that, but no, I love this work. I am a former business owner myself, so I'm married to an engineer. I kind of get how all these things all work. And as a former business owner myself, I know in the industry what I would have liked to have had versus what I had. And then being an educator as well, it's also been nice to be able to see how all these things can kind of marry. So I am definitely on board for this, and thrilled to have the opportunity to be able to further our work. in meeting the needs of kids. Ultimately, that's what it's about, right?
Yep. What was your business?
I've had several, and one which was probably one of the latest ones was I'm a designer for clothing for handicapped people.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a big need out there, really big, especially when you personalize it. So, but yeah. I don't know exactly what you would like to ask me, but I'm thrilled to take any kind of questions you may want.
So any thoughts as you kind of move into this role of things you'd like to accomplish, changes you want to make? Kind of, are you still just trying to get a lay of the land?
Still getting a lay of the land, but I also do have certain things that absolutely that I'd like to see. For instance, one of the things I really want to see is that our middle school students actually have opportunities where they are getting some hands-on opportunities to be out in industry and see what there is, so they have a better understanding of the why of their educational endeavors. And then by the time they get into high school, that they actually can see where the learning that they've been achieving, they understand how to learn. I think STEM is a big piece of that, but so is CTE, and so that's why I think that they work very well together. I would also like to be able to see then when a student gets out of high school that they actually have a viable plan that they have practiced. And so they know what it is. So if we can build internships, that kind of thing, I think would be very, very viable. I don't think a day of a job shadow do a checkbox is it. I don't think doing a career plan that isn't also a checkbox, because schools have to do it, but that they actually have time to delve in and experience it, spend time with people from industry, and understand, again, where their gifts and talents may best be used, and then have a trajectory of what their post-education requirements are going to be able to achieve what they're interested in.
Any thoughts on how you're going to integrate STEM into CTE?
Well, I think STEM and CTE are already integrated in many, many ways. So, and I think it's I think there's a lack of understanding of what that means. So I think the communication piece that needs to be better marketed out there and help people to understand. It may take some more professional development for people to understand how the two marry. As a former CTE instructor myself, use STEM all the time. I mean, if you want to call it STEM, I mean, that's, yes. Science, you can't say if you're a culinary teacher, don't tell me you don't do science. If you're technology, don't tell me that you, again, don't use technology, let's say a culinary class, or how about a child development class? You are using both of those things. Engineering, you have to know how to configure a room, how to build something to be able to make it work right. And then, of course, then math, it's all about math. So I don't see where it's not, quite frankly, and that's my lens at this point. And having been out in the field and practiced it, yeah, I see that they're hand in hand.
Your question, Lisa?
Yeah, just hi, it's nice to meet you.
You too.
I have a son who's actually in the 7th grade, and so I was curious about this. I love the idea of middle school before they're already in high school. Are you thinking it's more towards something you try to do as they're coming in from the elementary school while they still have that maybe wide open wanting to learn, versus they're kind of more, gone through a lot of changes in those 3 years to 8th grade? Where do you think is the most important place to catch the mindset? Because we also have the maturity they've developed by the time they're 8th graders. So I'm just curious what you're...
Well, in regards to, say, let's STEM and CTE both, it starts in kindergarten, quite frankly.
Agree.
And so, and I have a real concern when I see new teachers saying things like, well, I have so much math and so much reading to do and writing, I don't have time for science. And I'm hearing that administrators saying, well, don't worry about the science. It's like, well, then how are you teaching math if you're not using science and math? Because I really believe that there has to be that authenticity there. Why am I doing what I'm doing? You're either memorizing a bunch of formulas and don't have any idea how to use them, but you've memorized them and you could probably pass a test, maybe, but how do you use them in life? And yet they're using them all the time and they don't know it. And that's one of the things that has always been an amazing thing about CTE is it's all applied all the time. So, but they have to know how to do those things CTE has always helped do that. STEM will help reinforce it even more. So it's about learning how to learn and how to use that information in things that they see and do. Little guys, when they're in the elementary schools, they have parents that work. What do they do? And is that something that they're interested in? What skills does that take? So they're at least seeing that and starting to connect, oh, you know, if I'm doing this math problem, how do I build a fence? Well, do I have a fence at home? And how do we figure out how to do it? So those are the kinds of things that I see where there's real authentic learning and it's actually connected to real life as far as math goes, or say, again, science. Science is so authentic, and the fact that we've let it drop off is a real concern. So, and then, of course, technology, I think the little guys probably know more than any of the rest of us, quite frankly.
Well, yeah.
We are not digital natives, so, but they are, and they look at you like, what? I mean, I was watching a 3-year-old the other day just take this iPhone and do all this stuff with it. I was like, wow, show me how that works, because I just got an iPhone and I don't know how it works very well. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because the iPads, so, you know, in our districts, they get them in the 4th grade. And then what I'm seeing is that the librarian has been tasked as IT, and I'm seeing some issues there. Librarians are very vocal about this, right? They're not necessarily trained to deal with broken and difficult iPads, and so I'd be curious to see as CTE and STEM and everything moves together, what is our infrastructure for this technology? Because I think it needs some additional horsepower than what we've necessarily given it, and the interconnectedness to our rural community too.
Well, I find it curious, because one of the last school districts I was in, all the avid kids were given Chromebooks, and they were really hesitant to give them to them, because, well, you know, they'll probably break them. And I looked at them and I said, are you kidding me? Their phones are something that's so precious to them. You don't ever see them breaking them. This will be the same thing. And sure enough, 4 years later, they had 2 broken in the whole time of total accidents. So because they're precious to these kids, it's a part of their appendages, quite frankly, up to a certain point. It shouldn't be, but it is. And knowing that, we have to work with the digital native and stop trying to be the safeguards of and say, well, no, you can't do this now or then. Or, I mean, it's a typical thing that you hear in schools. The kids can't have their cell phones on during class time, and yet they're used to using them as a reference to understand and learn and know things. So, and if a teacher's still standing up there being the sage on the stage and a kid can Google it, you're not going to have any attention at all at that point. So that, again, this is where I see CT and STEM, or, you know, it's learning how to learn and then using it. So in context as much as possible.
Was there a question on the phone, Romano or Dwayne?
No, not at this time.
Okay. I had one more question. Maybe with Measure 98 dollars being out there and to fund CTE programs, there's lack of teachers, a shortage of trained educators for CTE and STEM kind of integration.
Yep.
Kind of how's that going to get addressed, and do you have a role in that, or where does that fit? Yeah.
It's a big need. It's very difficult. Bringing people in from industry is what we're having to do, which makes sense because they understand it. The hard part for people in industry, though, is they expect, you know, you either do this or you would be fired. I mean, but you're dealing with an adolescent. And so we also have to know, we have to be recruiting people that can understand adolescent development, but also still keep expectations as to, in the next 4 years, that's what's going to be expected of you. And rather than see you get fired, let's get you to do X, Y, and Z. So apprenticeships, those kind of things are going to be important. However, that also said, how do we find these people in industry? And who's willing to take a giant cut in pay? So, because schools can't afford them. And so I am, in the past, what I would work out is things with community colleges, bringing their professors in, paying them a certain amount of money to do these classes with kids. And at least they understand, community colleges at least understand the probably 18, 19-year-old. So getting down to the 15, 14-year-old isn't as big of a stretch for them, but it's still difficult. And so we need a lot of mentorship for these new teachers who are coming out of industry. We need them to understand particularly classroom management, because that's what kills any teacher, whether you're from industry or otherwise. That's the first thing that kills them. And so that would, to me, seems to be the top priority. So they understand the intricacies of the business of education, because it's different than if I'm out there in the field in ag or something else, or welding or whatever. It doesn't look like that. It's applied. So the assumption is they already know how to do these things, and they don't. So, and I would say that from listening to other industry partners, they are having a very difficult time getting people in there that have the professional skills, or soft skills as they're often called. I mean, can you come to work on time? Can you come in sober? That would be really nice. Can you, communicate? Can you collaborate? Do you know how to actually work side by side with somebody and be innovative about it? Have they learned how to learn and use it to problem solve?
Any questions? Good? You're good? Okay. Well, as you move forward, I think sometimes thinking about a different model, we have a lot of retirees coming out that have a lot of professional skills who probably don't want to go back to school and teach, but probably have a lot of great skills that could transfer to kids. So I think you need to think holistically about different kinds of models to tap that untapped talent, but that's something to look at.
No, and Jim, actually, that's who I've been using.
Okay.
Because yes, they're not ready to be done. I mean, too many of people that are older have decided to retire because they're old enough to do that, and why work for free, basically. So they retire, but then they find, hey, I'd really still like to be doing something. Yeah. It was fun for a couple of months, but now, I mean, I just was listening to some doctors that have started all these clinics that were retired, and they were all on the golf course and saying, I'd like to do something else. So they started all these free clinics. I mean, there is talent to be tapped, and I really think that we need to value that.
Okay. I sort of heard that somebody's planning on retiring, and so I just heard a volunteer for a program. Maybe.
I'm hearing.
Can we count on you for the next school year, Jim?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I want to go back to school for 2 years to get my teaching degree.
The great thing about CTE, you don't have to.
Oh, you don't?
No, that's what makes it even better, because basically you just have to take 9 classes over 3 years, and they're all online. Oh. So you'll find, because of you're older than average, that you've had enough life experience. Most of that stuff's going to be pretty easy for you just to sail through. It's not that arduous. The hard part, I think, and what we need to work harder on, is mentoring folks that are coming from industry with the expectations that they have from their experiences versus that of what's happening in the educational arena, and having them understand this system and how it marries with this one. I'm working hard on that one.
There's actually an interesting nonprofit called Encore that utilizes retirees, usually not necessarily in a classroom setting, but to work alongside nonprofits and others. And I think that's a fabulous untapped potential for us to consider in the state of Oregon, of really sort of, doubling down, or how do we elevate that opportunity in our community? Because it isn't necessarily about the financial resources. I mean, financial resources are important, but it's our human capital that we are underutilizing in this work. So how do we tap into that better? So
very much so. We have too many holes in the industry right now not to tap every resource we have, because they're all assets.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. We look forward to working with you. Exciting there at times, and obviously the state sees this as a very important area for our state, and then it's nice that we got the Cte Revitalization grants renewed, and Measure 98 dollars. So I think there's a lot of interest in our state from the elected, from the people, the voters, that they want to see this program move forward, because they see this as a path to jobs. So
it certainly is, and they're pretty excited about it. So, having been part of workforce development, even still, it's like, yeah, let's get it done.
Okay.
So, great. Okay.
Okay. On to the next item. Thanks.
Okay.
Handouts first. Is Tennille?
Yep, Tennille's
Yes.
online.
I am.
Great, Tennille. Fantastic.
She was probably, it might be easier for you to see.
Great.
Okay.
One pager.
Okay, Tennille, you're up on. Give us an update on the revitalization grants and what your process is and program.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to share that I'm on the CTE Executive Committee for my region, so the work you guys do is very, very important and well appreciated by me and our community, so thanks for your time. I also have the privilege of being on the Cte Revitalization Committee. This is my second round being the co-chair. And so essentially what we do is we get a great group of people together from both industry and education, and we also use our political partners, and we talk a little bit about how we're going to deal with the Cte Revitalization money, and ultimately we come up with a RFP that the state finalizes and sends out, which you guys have probably seen. The document that we passed out just now, I kind of heard you guys passing that out, is kind of an overview of what it is that we're looking at this time. And I'll run through that, but also be completely willing to answer questions of your interest regarding this, or some specific information about what the committee really wants. So this is a great deal of money, and it's an awesome opportunity to be able to fund some CTE programs in some regions. We really, at the beginning, talked a lot about how important summer program grants are, and I know you guys do at STEM a ton of summer program work as well. But the legislature really is interested in summer program work as well too. So we really pushed that up to the top of the list, and we made it possible that a applicant could apply for just a summer program instead of a whole year plus a summer. So inside the grant, you'll see there's a separate option for those who just want to just do a smaller portion of dollar and a smaller portion of programming. I was really thinking with my STEM, the group, wow, this is a great opportunity to offer that dual kind of concept of STEM and CTE and where they intersect, especially in the summertime. So that was one of the things I was super interested in that I shared this week in our meeting. We really want to make sure that extra emphasis will be placed on applicants' plan to use other available funding. So districts have a lot of Measure 98 dollars. Other programs have a lot of grant money. What does it look like to kind of braid the resources of the CTE funding with their other current funding mechanisms to see what we can develop in that way? So there will be kind of a section where you need to kind of share how not just CTE revitalization dollars are going to support a specific project or sustain that project moving forward. What does that look like to do that work? So the braiding of resources is a really important one for the team this year. Applications that focus on developing middle school CTE courses or experiences will be considered as long as there is a corresponding high school program for the students to pursue. Middle school has been a really high flyer issue around the state in a lot of different areas because we do a lot of great work around elementary and a lot of great work around high schools, but the middle school group has kind of traditionally been left out. And as a middle school teacher, I understand it sometimes, but at the same time, we really think that intervention at that location is just super important to getting kids on the right pathway. So the team is absolutely wants to see a middle school, can absolutely accept a middle school application and desires that if it leads nicely into the high school program. So anybody who's currently interested in, let's do this really cool thing at the middle school. If they have a current, pathway or something to connect to at the high school, then they will consider that proposal as one that has a lot of merit and something that they're interested in reading. I shared with you about the Measure 98 funding, and they definitely will take the 98 funding and its infusion of 98 funding into consideration as they read those grants, and they will kind of pop up the list as a really good grant application. I think one of the key elements that we spent a ton of time on was it was about the weighting of the grant application. In the past, we put partnerships at the top, and the team really, really wanted to increase the weights for equity and sustainability. So they also have 25 points apiece, which is not the same as last round. And so the applicants are really going to have to focus in on how do you ensure the equity of opportunity for our served populations. And, you know, that looks different in Oregon sometimes because we don't have, in our small rural areas, we don't have as many diverse populations in terms of people with color or the like. But at the same time, we just want to focus in on gender, and we want to focus in on people with disabilities, English language learners. That whole robust population of underserved youth really needs to be a high level focus. So applications that do a really good job describing that and working towards an infused opportunity for underserved populations will have a higher rating. Sustainability is also an issue. They don't want to see applications that push in, you know, $350,000, $450,000 and no plan to ensure that it will continue afterwards. And we've all received grants where we've done a really cool thing and haven't been able to sustain it long term. You know, definitely happened to me a ton of times. I wrote a grant last year and got it, and I had a partnership agreement with my partners that they would continue to fund a level of sustainability moving forward. So definitely looking at in the grant how, after this money is gone, how you're going to continue this program will get you a higher level of points and ultimately help you get an award. We reduced the maximum awards from last year, just looking at the trends of what people actually applied for and used. So the maximum award for an individual recipient is $350,000, and the maximum for a regional group or more than one group person is, or more than one district or team member is $450,000. And I think the communication section is super interesting. We had a nice conversation about that. The team really wanted to make sure that students were involved, or that it was directly it was something that the students wanted. And it's a hard thing to do as a school superintendent. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you know, doing a survey data like this in such a short order would be so difficult. I don't know that they're necessarily asking for a focus group or anything like that, although we did bat that around. More to the point, it was, how do we know that this application is really what students want to participate in? And if it's not, is this really the direction we want to invest money in? So some kind of conversation around this is why the students, you know, this is why our community needs it and our state needs it, and this is why students want to participate in this region is something that they're looking for. And a diploma focus is also super important to them. You know, the state has come forward and said, listen, we got to focus on increased graduation, we got to focus on attendance, 9th grade on track, and interventions for kids that aren't succeeding at earlier grades. And so the team felt really passionate about, if this is going to help students graduate and be successful community members at the end of the day, then that's the grant that they want to hear. And to really focus in on those chief ed office and ODE, you know, goals of those 9th grade on track and attendance and diploma. So really infusing those conversations and those ideologies inside your grant will help you immensely. And then partnerships is more explicit this time, and inclusion of partners and what they're going to do. For me, the last time I had 35 partners and they all did different things, but there was really only, I would say, 6 industry partners that really were seriously embedded, and maybe 5 that were like, yeah, this is cool, I support it. And then my school district partners. So they're going to start asking us to do a little bit more explicit notification to the team about what that partner is signing on that they agree to do, and how that partner is supporting. So your partnership agreements would need to just be a little bit more robust in terms of the communication of what they provide. And overall, the grant is about 20 pages that we ask for at the end of the day, and we're really specific about that page limit. So we had people go over and under. So under's fine, but over causes a kind of some heavy heartburn for the team. So be careful about that. And just really good writing, explicit instruction, and to us about what happens. I mean, the team members look at it when they read and say, if I can't figure out what it is that you're doing, or I'm a little gray, I'm less likely, obviously, to score you at a higher point level. So be careful around that. And I think ultimately for me, as my advice would be, it's okay that you don't know exactly how everything's going to work because it's so new and it's innovative. If it's high wage, high demand, people are buying in, you've got good partners, and you've got a wonderful plan, and pathway designed. You don't have to know every single thing to the letter. They really give you grace involved in terms of the year and how it's embedded and how you're kind of developed and it unfolds. So take a deep breath when you're writing and don't worry too much about the nitpicky things, just the overarching expectations of your grant. The team, like I said, is a great group of people, and they're super excited about giving this money to innovative partners. And I really think that STEM has an opportunity to infuse themselves in this. We don't get a lot of STEM-style program opportunities, so I think the team would be really excited to see applications from your kind of wheelhouse or your lens. I'm open to questions, or ask away.
Any questions? Questions on the council? Timing-wise, I see you've got about 45 notices of intent to apply. When are the applications due?
The 15th, so it's a real short timeline.
15th of October?
15th. Yeah.
And then when's the grant?
It's 5 p.m. on the 15th. And then we'll do grant reviewing on the 24th and the 25th. We have a meeting scheduled on November 2nd to actually determine which grants are going to be awarded. And then notification comes out, straight away. ODE is fabulous at that. And then you typically get the money in the spring, so you can start, working towards the implementation of the grant spring, summer.
Great. Any questions from the council? Okay, well, we look forward to watching this progress, and we'll hopefully get some really good grants that come in that support the Measure 98 dollars, as well as alignment with high wage, high demand jobs. And hopefully, again, that there's that integration with CTE and STEM in these programs. So that'd be helpful to continue to track. So. Yeah,
absolutely. Please reach out if anybody has specific questions, want to email or chat on the phone. I'm more than willing to share more information or help anyone that needs it.
Thanks so much, Tennille. And if you need some help reviewing, we can tap the council members as well, perhaps.
Oh, great. They do need help, so I'll have Gabby send that out.
Learn more about what people are applying for.
Yeah, it's actually really insightful.
You got your review committee all set, and is there a couple extra spots there if we had somebody that was interested?
Yeah, I believe they've just sent a list, a general email out about that. So I'll make sure, or Laura, you're there, so you can make sure Gabby sends that out. So, or whomever, and you're tasked with that task, at your place. And I know we're looking for reviewers. It's always hard to get enough.
Okay, great. All righty, thank you very much, and great program, and it's great that the state funded this, and I look forward to the results. So, all right, let's move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Tennille.
Thank you.
STEM Innovation Grant Allocation, Deb?
Yes.
Morning.
Hi, thank you. What I wanted to bring to the council this morning is ODE and Chief Education Office's collaborative effort to come up with a new innovative grant for the STEM hubs in a way. So I want to give some background. Talk a little bit more about that, but you can move forward one more. There we go. So as a reminder, the purpose of the STEM Innovation Grants, according to the OARs, is really to come up with innovative approaches to STEM-based education or provide professional development related to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So that's the very generic general purpose from the OARs for these STEM innovation grants. You can move forward. So as you know, the legislature continued the funding of the STEM hubs and the STEM innovations. For the STEM hubs, they really were giving us a lot of feedback that they wanted to move away from a competitive funding model for their own individual programming grants that the hubs received, and that came out of the bucket of funds for STEM hubs. So there was a concern with the programming model that we had established thus far. We also overall had a decrease in funding per hub for programming dollars. So you can see here the past programming dollars for the hubs. This is a rough estimate for the 2013-15 biennium, simply because the grants for programming and backbone are combined. But those were estimated for 3 different hubs there, what they received in 2013-15. And then you can see that was somewhat decreased in 15-17. And then we went to the tiered approach, which we presented at the last council meeting. And the tiered approach came from direct feedback from the hubs that they wanted to get away from that competitive model like we talked about, but we needed to develop a fair and justified funding model. So we came up with that more of a block structure grant in that tiered approach, and those tiers were determined based on geographic density and cost of living, population density. You can move forward there. There we go. So we moved away from the competitive model. We felt that tiered approach was going to be more aligned with the continuous improvement process that we had set up with the hubs last year. And we also felt that it actually was a benefit to the hubs to possibly reduce their programming funding, because it is an expectation that the STEM hubs will have and will continue to build facilitation and coordination with regional partners, who then in turn will be able to offer programming through other outside funding sources. So again, those amounts were based on population density and geography, cost of living, those such things. So what we're proposing, so there's 2 concepts here. In that one, we were reducing overall the programming money that the hubs were receiving in the past. They got a considerable reduction in what they had received. So there's that concept. But then there's also the concept that the money that we have left over, the $840,000, came from a discontinued STEM innovation grant. And so it was designed by the legislature to be used in innovative programming ideas. And so we took a look at what we thought would be innovative, or what we could incentivize to be innovative for the STEM hubs to be doing in their programming. So we're going to talk about some of the areas, the priority areas that we felt were important to address in this next biennium. And right here we have, you moved a little too fast on me, but that's okay. Systems building. So the systems building areas, in just my short year and a half here, I think I've seen a lot of growth in the network as far as their ability to see themselves as part of a network and do cross collaboration with each other. And so we want to incentivize that work so that that continues and builds even stronger. So that's one area of system building that we'd like to see hubs work in. And just like Tennille spoke to, we are really encouraging and incentivizing that braiding of resources as we have Measure 98 monies coming out soon. The opportunity for STEM and CTE to work together a little bit more collaboratively and coherently with those different funding sources. That addresses a direct goal within the STEM education plan. So goal number 1 and outcome number 1. And then thirdly, we have, like I said, in my short time here, we have heard over and over again the need to increase leadership development and engagement throughout these STEM initiatives, and addressing goal number 3, outcome number 2, which is directly providing leadership capacity building throughout the state. And finally, the increasing equity. Increasing equity in all that we do is our goal number 2 in the STEM education plan. And then specific programming. We really, Mark and I and Donna and Laura, we sat and we talked a lot about what the hubs were telling us and the area of need that we have in our state yet that hasn't necessarily been covered through other funding sources. So that's actually number 2 there, increased time on science in elementary school. That is something that we're hearing over and over again, and the data is telling us that that is a necessity. It's also an area that we have not directly addressed in any other of our funding sources thus far, but it is a direct goal in our STEM education plan for us to work on increasing time in science. And so we want to prioritize that with this potential proposed grant.
I do want to point out there that several hubs are explicitly working on that already through the allocations that they've had over the last 2 bienniums.
Right.
So it's not like
it's never been worked on, but
it hasn't been a priority for many of them already, but there hasn't been a concerted effort within the STEM innovation grants to prioritize that time on science explicitly.
Yeah, we've never put it as a direct priority area, but some hubs have taken it upon themselves to make that their priority area. So we're hoping to use this grant to prioritize some of these areas that have been explicitly called out in the STEM education plan, but yet haven't had that direct funding backing. So that was a second one there. The first one there that I kind of skipped over, but to increase the impact of the other 3 STEM innovation grants. We have heard from certain hubs that they don't have a math and real life site, for example, but they would love to work with their area hub that's right next door to them to really get involved in that grant. And so that's an opportunity for them to apply for this STEM innovation money to say that they're going to increase their involvement in math and real life, STEM beyond schools, or computer science and digital literacy. So building that collaboration and capacity there. And then again, we added these both to the system building priority areas as well as the program priority areas because it is such a great need and it may not have been directly addressed in other funding sources. Again, some hubs have been working on this, just like in the time on science in elementary school, but we've never had a direct funding source to possibly work on leadership development and engagement, and then possibly working directly on equity throughout all of the work.
So just a subtle point regarding that. From a systems building perspective, we're expecting all of the grants and all of the hubs to be focusing on equity. Per the conversations that we've had internally, but also that arose at the last STEM Council meeting, the need to engage superintendents and principals also in these other, in all of the grant efforts. You know, that's important from a systems perspective. These, by calling it out as a specific program priority as well, we're also seeking specific program efforts to address issues around equity or issues around leadership development. So not just, coupled with other grant opportunities, but specifically to this. For example, working with business and industry to stand up mentorship programs, for students of color in a particular area, or having a leadership academy that helps principals and superintendents really understand a deeper understanding of the opportunity of applied learning and to braid and support the Measure 98 and CTE funds and the STEM efforts as a cohesive whole. So looking for specific programming ideas in addition to those cross-cutting. So that's why we put it on Tuesday.
Yeah. And again, it is, equity is a running thread through all of the grants that we give out in ODE. But again, this was an opportunity. We looked at this as 2 things. It was, one, an opportunity to provide the hubs with more programming money because their programming funding, as you saw at the beginning, decreased considerably in the last 4 years. But it was also an opportunity to prioritize this innovation and this ability to come up with direct programming that would affect and speak to equity through what they're doing. And Mark just gave some great examples on things that they could do. So we felt that it was a good balance, and we did feel that we were, with this proposal, we really felt that we were reactive to the feedback that we were getting from the hubs. Hubs were concerned about their programming dollars coming down so low, but yet understanding kind of where the state was at, understanding where we're trying to go with the funding, that we don't necessarily want to fund programming forever, and we've talked a lot about that. So they understand that decrease of funding over the years. But there's still a lot of innovative things out there that they want to do. And the fact that these were technically STEM innovation funds that we can decide to give to just the STEM hubs through our work through an RFP, we wanted to think about what are the areas that we really wanted to incentivize. And so this is really what we came up with, the areas that we were interested in incentivizing based on the STEM education plan. We don't have the details yet worked out on whether these will be a rubric point value or weighted in something, but we're at the point where we wanted to come to you with some with our idea and get some feedback from you on what you think.
Great. And
you can move forward with that last one. So the last point to make is the eligibility. These would be eligible, or the only applicants eligible would be that they are receiving a backbone grant and they have an approved partnership plan. So these STEM funds would not necessarily be available to any potential new hubs that are funded this year. It will be a competitive grant. We would like to do an external review and bringing possibly some of you on board to review RFPs. And then that is the proposed timeline there that we're looking for. Release, review, and expenditure of funds.
Questions from members? I have one question as people think about it. I didn't see anything around scalability, these programs. I think one thing that's important is that it's just not a one-off program, that there isn't any ability to think about how this could be scaled to larger capability. So while this might be a valuable thing to do, I think they have to have a thought about how they could take that and make it scalable to their entire hub or for other hubs. But I do worry that it becomes a one-off thing, and then it just kind of happens and it goes away, and there's no way of sustaining that capability or that program. So I think both scalability and sustainability are really important, just like we talked about with the Cte Revitalization grants. Has to have some vision of where's this going to take me, and obviously it's a portfolio you're going to learn. But if it's just a one-off kind of, here's I want to go do this cool thing and that's it, it doesn't seem like it shows the depth and breadth of kind of what do I want to do with this in a larger context. So yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a question. So thinking about the South Salem Metro STEM Hub, you know, it has a lot of involvement with the local schools. I mean, I've been seeing that hub in particular, you know, be very much on the cutting edge of STEM growth. My question is, across the hubs in general, you know, your thoughts on what you're seeing for community engagement, you know, and anything we need to be thinking of there in order for these to become standalone, right? Because as you said, funding is expected to go down. Our community is starting to come together and say, we plan to take ownership of this hub, and here's how we want to do it, like Economic Development Group out of Bend, for instance. I would imagine, I'm just curious if those conversations are happening.
Yes, I do think that they are happening across the state. I would feel confident in saying that they're at different levels depending on the region.
Yeah.
So, and that is an area that we are working on with all of the hubs, trying to speak to and work on that communication of that economic viability for the region. And they're improving, really. And I think that your point, Jim, to the scalability and sustainability, we also, you know, one of the areas that we want to prioritize, and I don't think we've really worked out on how we will actually prioritize those areas, but really it is that cross-hub collaboration. And that is one area that we think that if the hubs can start to work together as a network, we really start to cover the state with some of these ideas instead of just particular regions. So if one hub has a phenomenal idea that could be scaled up to other regions, they can start to work collaboratively with other hubs.
Yeah, that is really the focus, the scalability, or we call it spread. You know, of those ideas through
collaboration.
I think to your point, Lisa, we've seen with the decline of, or the increase of hubs, so you know the pie hasn't grown for hub dollars, but the number of our hubs have grown. We have prioritized backbone funding and support for those hubs, but knowing in the calculations and in our communications with the hubs that the state wasn't intending to provide all of the necessary backbone funding in order to fill that out, to try to increase that idea of sustainability over time. And you'll see that our match percentage is, like last time that we presented to the council for the recommendations around the hubs, that the match, the expected leveraged funds are pretty significant now and going up over time. What we've heard from the hubs is that oftentimes it's easier to get local partners to contribute to program dollars and much harder and more difficult until the hub has established their credibility in the community, until they've had an opportunity to develop those necessary partnerships, that it's much more difficult to get the backbone support. And we're seeing that shift as well now. So yeah, it's very much on our minds, and there's a real intentionality and candor in our conversations with the hubs around that.
So one follow-up question then, which is that's fantastic. So I know that our hubs are focused on the community. So K through 12, post, goes in college, and then also our workforce that either wants to engage with what they're doing or retraining. So, but setting aside everything but K through 12 for a minute, are we seeing any conversations happen with K through 12 with respect to their contribution to STEM hub growth over time? In other words, seeing that connection. So let's say we've got this enforced now, and we're trying to get middle schoolers into, on their CTE, which was said this morning. What is the level of joint collaboration between our K through 12, which has a huge funding in our state legislature for supporting the hubs? And I'm just bringing that up as, is there room for that conversation once we feel the STEM hubs, like you said, Mark, are really maybe an integral part of the community?
It's interesting because I think that how we think about contributions should be broadened beyond fiscal contributions. Yep. So in several hubs, if not all of them, we have superintendents and principals who are participating in governance conversations. That's a real commitment of time for very, very few people. Those districts also prioritizing time for their educators to participate in professional development, to participate in the computer science grants, to participate in the science professional development that is going on. So I think that, or opening up their school buildings for, to house different activities for the grants. So there's a lot of ways that we need to make sure we're thinking about and honoring as what those contributions are. When it comes to hard dollars, yeah, it would be interesting to get that kind of breakout from the hubs to see if I believe that one hub I've heard of, but I need to verify it, that each of the districts did provide a certain degree of financial contribution to the hub's operations, but I need to verify that.
Yeah, I think that would be really key to highlight
sustainability
in the state legislature next time around. And I'm just thinking that, advocates like our chief education officer and others, as we see the integration happen, it'd be nice to have that advocacy by the K through 12 folks to the state legislature that this is not some sidebar thing.
Right.
This is becoming integral to our children's education. And like you said, there's value from it. They're getting some professional development support from our hubs. And it just, because we're now far enough along, it's not necessarily it's not a science project anymore, right? If you were to pull these hubs out, I think every community would be hurt at this point. So, yeah.
Certainly for our cohort 1 who have had sustained things, cohort 2 have had a less amount of time, and now cohort 3, as we look to the 0 to 3 hubs that we're going to be releasing an RFP shortly for new hubs, they're going to require a different degree of, I believe that they need that same opportunity of support from the state to get their feet under them and to have those efforts. So I think we'll probably see perhaps some additional expectation to the earlier hubs around what sustainability and shifts are expected from them.
Absolutely. I mean, to use our equity lens for a minute, our later hubs, by definition, are coming in from areas of the state that fall under more of that lens.
Right.
So we really have to support this last phase to give them the same opportunity to get up and running. Yeah. Critical. Well, however we can help with these conversations.
Yeah.
I'd like to come at this a different way, maybe, and I think I'm kind of where Lisa is, but so we're doing all these really cool things with innovation programs, and we're having some success. We're learning, they're working, but they're not systemic through the system at this point. They're at 1 or 2 schools, they're at 1 or 2 classrooms. When does this become mainstream, and how does it become mainstream, and how does the Department of Education say, oh, math in real life is part of the curriculum, it's not this thing that you have to go get funding for to help, to try these things out. And I don't understand the system large enough, the ecosystem here, because I think with computer science, math in real life, some of these other things, digital literacy, all these things that we're doing are really cool, and we're seeing successes, but I don't see the pathway yet to integrate them into the educational framework. And maybe that's a Salam Noor conversation strategically, but we can't continue to just do innovation grants and put them on the wall and then they cut off and they die because it's like something that we don't want to touch in the system. If it doesn't become organic and part of the system, it will just be a waste of our resources. And so I know the hubs are doing good work and they're finding successes, but if I was a parent in those districts where one school was getting this math in real life and things that were really cool, like we saw down in Eugene with the tech stuff, my kid wasn't getting it, I'd be saying, this is really cool stuff and kids are excited and learning and my kids aren't getting it. And I don't know quite how to make that happen necessarily. So Mark, I don't know your thoughts on this. This is the big systems issue, but it is the thing that we can't keep doing innovative grants and just have showcases. And I know we can push from the bottom up, but there also needs to be some guidance from the top down that this is an expectation for our school district.
What of what we're doing in the research department of our company can be brought out and put into the product side?
Brought to market.
Brought to market.
Better way to put it.
From a business language.
Market.
Yeah.
And K through 12 curriculum is a huge place. We ought to be getting that influence at some point, and that's why I brought up that advocacy. When do they adopt the new products?
Yeah. No. I think
you keep inviting me to.
This is the key piece.
A very, very important question, right? And I know that the folks at ODE share it. We and as this council has talked in the past, this notion of program richness for how do programs then impact systems so that they are adopted and integrated into the cultures, into the practices, and I think it's important to understand that the education community, particularly K-12, have been, I would say, inundated and with a host of programs and initiatives over the years, and there's a sense within, there's a suspicion that, oh, well, in 4 years, this funding's going to go away, so I'll take what I can from the funding right now and do that, what I believe is best for my kids and my school and my community, and yeah, it'll pass. This too shall pass, and the idea, and we hate to think that way, but that's the reality for people on the ground every day trying to manage this work with few resources, with high expectations, high visibility, high risk, and so how do we create the supportive conditions for people to adopt the shifts? And I believe that it lies in communication, it lies in building culture. I think it lies in building an agreement around the outcomes that we're trying to achieve that go beyond test scores, that resonate with educators. So as we talk about critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, communication, all of those 21st century skills, I think in the heart of hearts, every single educator in the state of Oregon believes in that. And yet, you've got systems and accountability structures that run counter to those values and beliefs. And so the real challenge is to say, okay, if we communicate that these are our values, then what about our practices are aligned to those values, right? And so I think what's incumbent upon us is to make sure that as we communicate these grant opportunities, that we communicate those values, we communicate those outcomes, we communicate what's working and why it's working. We harness the peer network. You know, oftentimes it's not just the message, but it's the messenger. I can speak to a group of principals, and it's going to be totally different than if Laura Foley speaks to a group of principals versus a Terrell Smith, you know, speaking to a group of principals. There's different credibility within the principal network itself, within the superintendent network. So we need to harness our communication structures. We need to harness our leadership and the people who have that vision and understanding to help their peers understand why is this a value and why does it align to the things that they're already trying to achieve. And that is the big lift. And so, you know, focusing on leadership, focusing on communications as a critical element, helping later in our agenda today, how do we harness business community in the local setting to use their leadership structures and connections to build a groundswell of, I guess, demand, you know, for these kinds of programs, and to work with parent outreach so that it becomes an expectation that every single middle school kid has an opportunity for hands-on, minds-on learning and to see business and industry in their community and to understand what those opportunities exist. That's the real work. It's not, you know, more programs. It really isn't. So you'll see that throughout these programs, these innovation grants, we've tried to build in that intentionality and that interconnectedness. To what extent has it been working? I don't know. You know, some days it's like, wow, we're really seeing this real, you know, shift in people going, I get it now. You know, the work that Thompson Morrison is doing, you know, both in Bend and within Dayton and Yamhill County, the work that Heidi Sipe is doing up in Umatilla. I mean, there's pockets of excellence throughout the state. I think what we need to do is communicate and help people identify and say, oh, I can do that. I can do that too. It's not just the Lake Oswego's or the more affluent community. Sorry, Lake Oswego. But it's not just the more affluent community, the ones with resources that are able to have these kinds of programs, but they exist everywhere. So that's the real work. So thank you. It's absolutely the right question. And we don't have a specific answer, but we have a host of strategies that we're trying to have around it.
When do you anticipate us needing to have some more clarity on that from a messaging standpoint with respect to next push for these programs? In other words, and maybe not the answer now, but you know, what is the timeline for getting that rapport with Chief Education Officer with respect to where they see hubs fitting and, you know, that joint mapping of vision? I don't know how we ought to try to progress down this track, but maybe some thoughts, not now, but at the next meeting, or, you know, what
you're looking for is a strategist to take what we've just talked about and make it into a plan, if you will, on how that's going to happen, and think about the impediments and the leadership and the development, the training, because there are elements that you have to have. If you miss some of those change management elements, you're not going to be successful. And it really does take a strategist to think about, okay, we know what we know here, this is what we want to achieve, you know, very well articulated, but there's a big gap between where we are and where that ultimate achievement is. And so you have to kind of plot out the change management part of that, the specific actions you're going to take, and not to make it programmatic, but you have to have some structure to it, or else it isn't going to happen.
Yeah, and it would be interesting as we discuss here later in the agenda about really up a broader advisory group with field experience, that becomes an element of the conversation. We've also been in conversation with Kyle and others about doing, Kimberly Howard, Deb Bond from the Arts Commission, about doing some regional convenings that bring the business community together alongside the hubs and educational leaders to have those kinds of conversations within regions. When we get to a state level, we're dealing with another many more layers of complexity, from politics to funding to agency interactions to what have you. But I think that what we can do is support our hubs and our regional efforts to raise those and to learn from those and pull back that kind of information and feed that into the state level interactions, so that the policy environment is really driven by the field. Is what our intent, at least at the Chief Education Office, always has been in supporting these regional initiatives, the RACs, the early learning hubs, the STEM hubs, is really intended to empower and mobilize community, and then to create a policy environment that supports those communities. So yeah, I think you guys nailed it right on. So let's make sure that continues to be part of our intentionality, whether it's communication or business outreach, our standing up of our advisory committee or advisory members, et cetera.
Thinking about our work plan development.
Yeah.
I'm sort of at the place where we've got our startup company and it's gone through some things, and now it's got some marketable products, and there's that valley of death thing.
We're in the valley of death.
How I think of, and I have my own.
I was hoping the valley of hope.
The valley of hope. It's still a valley.
STEM Hub Day in the Capitol might be fun.
Yeah.
With all our students. I mean, I'm just trying to, and maybe that's not the right thing to do, but there is great work, and our teachers and our students are so effective when they're in the Capitol. So, yeah. All right, I'll let it go.
So let's.
Don't let it go.
No, I think this is exactly the work we need to do, and I think it may be that the state has to think about how they allow permission for people to do some of these innovative things as opposed to being very tightly controlled, and it may be decentralization, but tight, loose kind of controls and things like that.
Dwayne or Romana, do you have some thoughts or questions you'd like to ask or share?
No.
The only thing
Hello?
Hi.
Barely. Like Dwayne.
Yeah.
I think it's,
I'm going to say, I've never known Dwayne not to have something to say, so.
Dwayne, do you have any comments?
I think there's a tech issue here.
Yeah.
hold on.
Okay, so while he's doing that, so back to this regional idea, right? Down to it, our senators and House representatives are elected regionally, right? So that connectivity with them would be really good.
Yep, absolutely. Elected officials is part of it. Chambers of Commerce, Regional Economic and Workforce Development members, all of those. Yep. Thanks.
I think we lost him.
Wayne gave up. Or he's reconnecting. All right.
Okay, well, I think we do need some guidance to Mark and the team about this $840,000. Does anyone have any concerns about this approach to allocating these dollars and the kind of structure they're trying to put to that? Does anyone have any opposition? You're okay with that, Celeste? Lisa, you okay?
I'm fine. I appreciate the shift in the funding model.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's make sure we provide an opportunity for the respondents to address scalability and sustainability as part of the rubric.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Romana, you okay?
Our strategist,
Absolutely.
the farm strategist with the facts of
Excellent.
instrumental.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Hey.
We can hear you. Fine. Go ahead. Your thoughts.
Okay, I dialed back in. Sorry. I was talking, but you couldn't hear me. And you're right, Mark. Rarely I have nothing to say. Okay, so a couple of things came up in that last conversation, because part of what you're describing is community organizing 101. How do you actually have systemic change that is embedded in an environment where you've got little program areas that they're doing great things, but they're not really being adapted because they're not seen. They're not thought of as important. They're not. They're seen as risky. You know, a whole lot of different reasons. And you know, we do advocacy around those very things. So I'm wondering how much of our responsibility is doing some of that advocacy that gives visibility to the work that's happening in a way that is not only seen as important, but is consistent enough that, you know, funding decisions, hiring decisions, community decisions get some air cover that they may not typically get. You know, and I'm thinking of the communities that you mentioned earlier, you know, whether it be Yamhill or in some cases like Amity and the folks that are doing some of the Innovate Oregon work. They got excited about the work that they're doing, but there was an advocacy campaign going on all the time to share what was important, why it was important. And it was individuals as well as people that were respected in the community that were doing it, which gave folks a platform to work around. So I'm just wondering, I'm thinking out loud, but I wonder how we give some of the folks that air cover that they need to do this work and make the changes necessary, right? Even if they don't have a long-term funding strategy, but to go ahead and do it anyway, recognizing that they may be able to generate those funding streams just by their actions in certain communities.
Great. Wonderful comment and suggestion. Maybe that could be a focus of one of our communications and advocacy committee.
Right.
To really look at that and how do we showcase the folks that are doing that innovation work and give them public acknowledgement and support and that air cover locally to their community and populace and other community leaders. That once people start seeing this work in the press and in other forums, it becomes a lot easier to get additional utilities and banks and other folks to start, you know, ponying up and contributing to the game. I know that in Lane County, you know, some of the work that T. Smith and the OCSDA work, you know, was instrumental in leveraging additional dollars to double down around the computer science work there. So this is itself, you know, so yes, we need to be communicating much better.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to get the legislators in the districts to Lisa's point. There are key advocates. We need to get them to go visit those sites, or not need to, but I think they should see an opportunity to go visit those sites, because I think when we saw what we saw in Eugene, it was spectacular, and the engagement of the children and the excitement, and you immediately say, why not everybody, you know? And so I think it is that asking the hubs, and maybe some of this money, as we think about it, to sustainability and scalability, is we need to see an outreach plan to your legislators to come in and see what you're doing and really engage them in the success you're having to start building that advocacy, because they are closer to the ground. They have those connections more than we can do. And I will tell you, most legislators want to go be a part of this, and they want their picture taken with the kids, and they want to see successes. And so I think as we get this grant, I'd like to see some of this saying, we want to see a plan where you bring in your local leaders, mayors, legislators,
school boards,
school boards, and show them what you're doing so that they can connect to it, and not to you, but the kids. Yep. Because the kids are the messenger, just like what we saw when we were up at the Concordia thing. Kids know exactly what they want, and they know how to learn, and they get excited and engaged, and they're the best messenger here. So, yep, it'd be great.
I think that's key. I think it's key to actually ensure that there is funding for that, and that the hubs and the folks around them recognize that we want them to do that work, because it's too easy. Just like we talk about backbone dollars being, you know, hard to justify in the beginning. This is the same type of thing. We pay for people to actually do work on the ground, and we don't really give them dollars to say, oh, by the way, spend like 5% communicating this work out to other people, including your local legislator, to let them know what's going on, because the legislator will come. If they know that something like this is happening in their district, they will come to see it. I mean, they're guaranteed.
You just have to invite the press at the same time, and it's a win-win for them, you know, in terms of getting their picture in the paper with kids doing cool stuff.
Yeah. And my mind goes also to the work, the great work that Oregon Ask does. They're very good at this kind of communication, and it would be good to reach out and partner with them and hear more specifically from our STEM hubs around some of their needs in this regard, because we do have a communication effort across the hubs to talk about and to highlight some stories and to create a couple of videos, you know, of best practices. And yet this whole planfulness around advocacy, I think we're all struggling with not having that communication expertise and marketing expertise as part of it. So it would be interesting to do that, and maybe even again, some of our business and industries who do have that marketing expertise and communications background could help also support the hubs at a local level as part of their contribution to the hubs, to help them really think through a communication strategy. So great suggestions. Wow.
Thank you. Yeah.
From this little presentation on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is my idea. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Okay, I think
I hope you're thinking better.
I got a lot of that.
It's all on
Okay,
record.
good.
It's been all
It's all on
recorded,
record, right?
so we can go back and read it.
Yeah.
So Dwayne, you're the one I hadn't heard from. Are you okay with this allocation of dollars to this effort with the modifications that we talked about?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you have your
Okay.
process, and
Yep.
I think trying to get, as you get schedules done, sooner you get dates out there for reviews of these, sooner we can maybe get it on our schedule so that we can participate in it.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you very much, Deb.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good
Do we
discussion.
want to take just a 5-minute, or
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
and then when
Quick
we
bio break.
move, bring back your thinking caps for some additional conversation like this that just happened in terms of establishing our goals for the year. What do we as a council want to accomplish? What additional information is needed? What sort of, I guess, steps or strategies we will take to accomplish those goals for the year. We've got some things like a report to the legislature that's due in December that we'll be working closely with ODE on, but that's part of our priority as well as a council. We've talked about rebooting our committee structure. We've talked about establishing this advisory structure. Those are strategies, so I would say, to what end, right? So what is the goal of establishing the advisories and the other committees? So let's take a 5-minute and then we'll reconvene. 10:35.
10:35. Okay. Take a stretch break.
Restrooms are out around the corner.
Is there any coffee downstairs?
Yeah, at the very bottom.
Will
be the best coffee,
There's
but it's
coffee
coffee.
down. All right, there's cafe.
Cafe in the-
There is?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going all the way there. I'll be right back. Yeah, I got up at 4 this morning.
Oh, I just am like very undercaffeinated, and I've been on calls since 7:30.
Oh,
so
God.
I'm like, I was on the phone the whole drive,
Oh, geez.
like back to back. So I'm like,
Oh,
all
wow.
right, there's no caffeine. I'm just gonna be quiet until we get.
Right.
I'll be re-engaged here in a minute.
Okay, wonderful.
My kids are taking tests and writing iPhone papers and speak to.
That's right. 10.
Well, we say that.
Exactly.
Because
That's true, right?
legislators who've never heard of it.
They have short attention. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Right.
It's fun to pick on Lindsay, too. I know, in good fun. He likes to pick on us, too, right?
Nice thing to also talk about.
Yeah.
Have him and
Yes, because if we can support that, I'd like to make sure we are.
We need it,
We do.
honestly.
Yeah.
Well, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, so
Yep.
that's really good.
All right, folks on the phone, we will be reconvening here. Sorry, it went a little beyond the aspirational 10:35.
That's my fault.
Well, you know, we had to get caffeine in it and sugary.
Oh, you got two.
I saw that,
You're bouncing here in a minute.
came back.
Well, now I'll be able to just keep it together. I was not on topic or off. I was not really prepared for having what is involved in having two kids at two different schools. I'm in a whole new world. We're in public school for the first time this year.
What grade?
Those on the phone, Bell or
Full day kindergarten.
Yeah.
You too.
indications you can actually hear the text or Rohanna. Can you hear us
I'm here.
again?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Okay, just wanted to make sure that we've got that going.
Okay. Go ahead and get going again. So the next topic is the council work plan development for this year. Mark did send out some comments to you all and things to consider as we think about the work plan for the year. And obviously the last conversation was really on point in terms of some of the important things that we need to tend to. So I don't know if that's the best way to process this, or you may go around and ask for individual. Yeah, you want to start?
I'm saying, how do
How do we start it? Do you want to start it?
Can I have a couple minutes?
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the goals and things that we want to accomplish, and then how do we accomplish them? How's that sound? Where are we?
Yeah.
You know, and there's, with the council, I know that there's some, you know, monitoring the impact of our investments. Certainly that's an ongoing responsibility that we have to look at. There's aspects of integration of this work with other boards and commissions, and to ensure that we're connected to the transformations in the work system, as well as the ongoing collaboration with the HEC and the State Board of Education. And I know that we have some crossover individuals in those areas. So that's some of that as a goal, to continue that kind of integration. Would be helpful to see. So anyway, I want to be more of a fly on the wall and hear the council's input on these things.
So let's just take your list here. There's a starting point, and then we can see what we need to add to it. You all have that email from Mark. I think the list of things that we'd like to achieve, and maybe let's just go down the list and we can tick it off. And then if there's other things that people want to talk about, the first one, which has been an ongoing discussion topic, is an advisory group. We are all people from business, don't necessarily represent the educational community and others, both out of school as well as in school. And I think Mark asked the question earlier, to what end? It would appear to me that given where we are in our maturity and just the last conversation we had, the value of an advisory group to help us navigate kind of where we are today to where we need to go would be very helpful. Not just to critique our investments, but also to talk about the pathway forward to help us understand how this can get integrated into the system to become more systemic to our educational system, I guess, if you will. Any thoughts on that? There is a requirement under the bill that allows us to put an advisory committee together, right?
Yes. And you could read that as encouraging or requiring as well, depending on your point of view.
Yeah.
And what would we hope to get? I mean, are you hoping to bring together educators and business in an advisory group? To have another layer of business people that are different from the actual council?
The council has considered a list previously, as well as the Chief Education Officer has considered a list previously that included additional agency or commission representatives, as well as field representatives. So the idea being that in terms of a goal, would be greater coordination with other governing bodies. This is an advisory body, just for those who are listening on the line, and for the purpose of being more precise. So better integration and coordination with those other efforts, and then also to ensure that this council has, in addition to the folks at ODE and myself, other educator at the table who have that field perspective, whether they are ESD superintendents, whether they're a principal, whether they're a classroom teacher. We know that there's challenges with the timing, particularly for classroom teachers, but I think that there's ways that we can work and support their involvement.
You had a list at one time. Do you have that list in front of you? Could you just run off that list what we had in terms of a number and about just the size to make sure? Then clearly it would be helpful to write down what our objectives are for this group. But I think that would be part of the activity to put this together. So
yeah, it's some sector representation that we had previously talked about was from the early learning division. Somebody from the Department of Education, particularly in CTE, the formal K-12 education teachers and administrator, community college and workforce. We've talked about a four-year university person and a private university individual, out of school STEM programming, philanthropy, and legislative representatives. Those were the lists that we had previously to then complement our business and industry perspective that the council members bring. These would be non-voting members, but we can establish both kind of expected permanent seats or rotating seats at the table, if you will, as well as call on anybody to participate in committees as well. So those are the two places in the committee work and work groups, as well as sort of around the table. So we can think about it in a couple of ways.
And are we looking at it from a state perspective or a regional perspective?
I'd say
that's the question.
Yeah, I think you want regional representation. I mean, you want broad exposure throughout the state, so it doesn't become valley-centric, if you will.
Understood. I was just thinking of it as possibly a smaller mini advisory groups that are within region. I mean, that list that you just named off is basically in Lane County is where we are with ESD and STEM Hub now. So Connected Lane County, STEM Hub, ESD, Technology Association, the Food Sector Partnership, the Tech Partnership, Sector, Workforce, that whole crew, both our universities or community college, all of those folks come to the table. We're having that meeting already. It ends up being really big in the county. I mean, it's like 40 people show up to these things, and trying to keep it can be unruly. That, considering how large it is, I think we do a pretty good job of getting things accomplished because that's a lot of voices. My concern with this is that if we're going to bring these people together when they're already doing similar conversations within the region, it's got to be really narrow in terms of what they're supposed to do. And it's like one rep for a group, you know, it ends up being, to me, it feels a little bit like we're replicating something that's already happening, but specific for our council.
You know, what I'd like to see, and I just, maybe because I'm biased by the last conversation, is two things. One is an advisory council that helps us think about where we need to make our investments, you know, in terms of innovation, because we don't think of all the things we can think of, and maybe there'd be helpful there. And the second one is the navigation of how do we bring sustainability and scale to this program throughout the state. I mean, we don't know quite how to navigate from where we are to where we need to go. And we're at that point of how do we make this systemic. And I think we need help and advocates at the right place to help us think about how do we inject this into the system so it becomes part of the educational experience for our kids. And I think that's where we lack the knowledge. And to just talk about the same issues, I don't think is going to happen. We need to have people that can help us think differently, and how do we get from where we are to where we want to be, and help us think about that strategy, because that's where we are at, I think, in our progression. If it's just more people commenting and sitting around the table, it's not going to be helpful.
It's the same conversation, but at a different level. That would be my concern.
I think if we, to your point, Celeste, if we had a very defined plan for why this council is being selected and put together, right? They have think of it as a limited duration team.
Right.
Good point. Right?
Right.
And this is advocate
rather than a
kind of a SWAT team, kind of a like.
SWAT team. We want action. We want guidance on this specific thing, and at the same time we do that, we clarify the role that this advocacy is already happening at the regional level, so that we very clearly distinguish, to your point, what this group's going to be focused on. Because in other words, there might be a teacher on here, and that teacher on this role is not to be thinking about their region or their people. They're trying to put the teacher hat on for where we need to go broadly, versus the regional conversations are, these are our kids, right? These are our, so it's kind of a different person to serve on this for what we need, what you say, Jim, than broadly.
Well, I wonder. I'm also very mindful of this real intentionality that I expressed earlier in the connectivity to regions and the hub work. And I wonder, without double dosing an individual, that maybe we ask, increasing hub representation in these conversations, I think, would be extremely helpful to bring that field perspective. And maybe these individuals could be selected in part from the hubs, who understand then the on-the-ground reality of implementation, and they would bring that, whether it's a rural or a semi-urban or whatever their particular geographic challenges are, they would know those much more specifically than the current council makeup. And we wouldn't.
You folks hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hello?
Dwayne, you got a thought?
Oh, great. Yeah, there are two different things here that are really important. Number one is getting the input from particularly the education community. And the second is really about optics. We talk about the way that business and industry integrate or don't integrate with education. Yeah, and I can tell you, when you talk to educators, it's obvious to them that, at least from their perspective, that they're not involved in this process, right? They're business people deciding where the dollars are going to go. So this advocacy that we were talking about earlier could come out of this very group that's sitting with us, helping us figure out where the dollars should be spent most impactfully, and then be advocates with their peers to support the approaches that we're talking about as well. So we talk about breaking down the barriers of the fear of doing some innovative programs, the specter of losing the dollars and cents. Well, this is a way to actually be a part of that conversation to say, well, make your case through the advocates. Make your case through the advisory group that's sitting at the table talking to the people that are helping define where the dollars go. I don't think we can underestimate the value of that, and that's not happening in those different conversations across the state. They still see that there's a monolithic structure that provides dollars, and industry is one of those, and government's is another, right? So this is where you can actually sit down with both of those groups and have not only a meaningful conversation, be able to influence the decisions that are being made.
Yeah, good point. And for them then to be, like you said, so there was a third I heard, and that was that the members of the advisory, whatever order, to council to also be representatives of their constituencies and be able to communicate back to those constituencies.
Yes.
So that would be in a form of maybe one person from each of the hubs being part of this advisory council to represent the interest of that hub. Now, you wouldn't get a broad cross-section of talent or perspectives with that, but would at least get the regional perspective in terms of what the hubs think are the impediments to going to scale and where they are in the maturity and where they see additional investments helping them advance their initiatives in their hubs.
Well, the idea of keeping it small, why not give them a seat at the table and let them decide who gets to sit in it?
No, I agree with that. The question is, will you get that broad? You might get all one of the same person, and that's maybe that's not bad, but let's say everyone says, well, okay, we're going to send our superintendent.
Right. So we get an representation of K-12 or
but that's not necessarily bad because it's not good or bad. It's just it's a regional focus versus a sector specific kind of focus.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
What
we could do both.
Yeah, what should we do?
Right.
Yeah.
It's how do you approach it? I mean, the other question that comes out here that I keep asking in different ways is, how we engage the parents, and are there active parents that have a seat on something like this? I mean, I've sat on nonprofit boards where, we all act as if someone's given us an epiphany moment when they say, we should invite a recipient to our board of directors who really participates in our nonprofit, right? Who is the end user, who's our consumer. And then we invite the consumer, and gosh, it really opens us up to a lot of things that we're not seeing. So if we're going to do this, the reason I would want it to be defined and we're really clear, is it state or is it region or what is it we're trying to do, is because I think we've got one shot at adding another layer here. People are feeling a bit of fatigue from this, at least in our county. They have excitement about certain things but not others. And STEM CTE is something we keep hearing about. We know we need it. We, in this case, parents, teachers, right, in industry. But what does it mean? Is it effective? And can it just be part of what we do every day already? Right? So, that's my thinking on it. The other thing that I'm thinking, and we're not to this part yet, is, perhaps an advisory group starts here, but then actually dissolves. Right? This is a 12-month engagement, and we just do, sprints, right? Yeah. My business does that. Yeah. We do sprints, and then these people become integrated into our committees, right? And so while the advisory group is a limited engagement, we don't lose that enthusiasm and that energy and that know-how that now becomes part of our committee structure, and they're a committee member at large. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I see the advisory group a little differently then, because I don't see it as a place where people have to come to all the time. Like for the Oregon Inc., you have advisors and technical folks that are around the committee, and they may show up for 2 or 3 meetings, particularly ones that are focused on areas that they're experts or very interested in, and then the rest of the time they don't participate. So for that parent that you're talking about, if we have something specific around parent issues, not just them, but they may bring other folks to the meeting that have input. They can actually help with what we're doing. I just see in some cases, I see them as a means of reaching people that we may not even know we don't know about, because this is the space that they're in. And another is that we have at least some names that we have access to those other groups and experts that know more about certain things than we do.
That's an interesting concept, Dwayne. I'm on a transportation board as an advisor, and I think the pool of advisors is maybe, 40 people, but we're only engaged when needed. So they need something in a digital space, they email me. They need something around policy, they email someone else. So we're only engaged in that. We're on all the communication. We could attend meetings if we wanted to, but it's not required. And we show up really when it's time to engage our specific expertise. And that's been effective for that group. One of the challenges with that, though, that we've had in that particular transportation group is that when you're not attending meetings regularly and you're not dialed in on that basis, it's hard to make sure that your message is the same and consistent. So as an advisor on that, that's from the advisor's perspective, with that hat on, that can be a challenge.
I wonder also if we have the specificity of topic areas that would enable us to engage advisors in that form, and whether those arise out of our potential committees. So as we look at committee groups where we are tackling perhaps some more specific issues related, to equity, to advocacy and communications, to data and metrics, and can formulate advisors in that capacity.
What is the problem we're trying to solve with an advisory group?
I think to broaden our perspective, certainly in these sorts of deliberations.
So that we can.
There's a whole bunch of voices in the audience here. There's voices online. There's voices, who aren't necessarily in a formal public meeting structure, have the space to contribute. And I know that the council in a variety of different meetings throughout the last 4 years have opened it up to audience participation more. I think we need.
I see a few needs. Up until now, we've had this need to have our eyes open, and we've done it through various means. So we've had some sort of ad hoc membership in our committees, or we've gone, community and had local folks present to us real programs, right? The early data gathering phase. So I guess I feel like what I'm hearing, Mark, is that we have another data gathering phase, probably, that might make sense. We should talk about. I guess where I was leaning towards the advisory need right now was more on the side of ensuring that the progress we've made somehow gets integrated into the system. And I think the question is, do we as a committee feel we know enough about how the state of Oregon functions to really know how to integrate these programs out of our hubs with the broader system? If that's the question we're trying to answer, I guess it's
maybe what it is, and I think we're kind of circling around this, is we need to maybe set up committees that have specific goals and objectives to achieve, and then solicit advisors to those committees that can bring the expertise and knowledge in that specific area to that effort, and then get them, as opposed to having this big committee that's trying to be kind of meets all needs but doesn't really serve any needs, and really look at our committee structure and say, okay, there's an advocacy and implementation committee. Let's figure out who we need on that to help us think through that issue, and then let's go find those people and get them on that committee, because that's the best way to advise us, and come up with that on data and metrics, like we did with data metrics. We brought people from Oregon State and ODE, people who had the data, the information. They were our advisors because they knew what's going on. And so rather than trying to create this huge kind of monolithic structure, let's just be very focused on our committees and bring the advisors to those, make sure we have the right committees to help us advance our objectives, but then let's find those advisors and get them on those committees and have that the vehicle. And then they're always welcome to come to this committee as an advisor, but they're really targeted in that area, and then they'll feel more value and they have a reason to be there.
Well, and I could see there being a committee, like you said, on the, the implementation positioning piece, and then there might be a committee on how we should advocate for this is working in these few schools that scale out. And I could almost see every teacher from each of the STEM hubs being someone you'd call on to get their perspective on how they'd see scaling out programs down, on the ground, or the superintendents, or so thinking about the regional expertise as being tagged to help this subcommittee answer that question. And maybe that isn't one that would be a subcommittee on, but I just want something that wasn't advocacy and implementation. It was more direction we're giving to how we do the STEM Hub grants, for example.
I'm hearing that there's a clear need to have advisors working alongside council members in committees around specific topics.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that there's agreement, I think, broadly in advisors in that capacity.
Because we've done that model once, and I found it really effective.
Yep. So, yay, let's go forward with that. The second piece is this idea as Dwayne said, that there's a perception of a disconnect in voices around this table in this kind of a forum to have integration and coordination and perspective, not just at the committee level, but at this deliberative level. And, you know, there has been, for example, the new Workforce and Talent Board, there is a spot for a council member to be part of that. So there's coordination across these other efforts that I think is also needed. And I believe that having regional and field perspective at this table is a very valuable and a high priority from what I've heard from the field, that they feel like there's too many layers between what's happening here and their reality.
Can we bring that regional perspective
So I think we
to the table
what I'm saying.
with our committees, though? In other words, we report out committees, at least we did when we were running them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason we can't have whoever in our committee that represents
Sure.
be here for these, you know, so there are voice at the table. It's a bullet, it's on the agenda, right? It's
Yeah.
an opportunity to voice directly. Just trying to find that middle ground of if they're, because then they have a real reason to be at the table.
Yeah, well, I'm claiming that there's two roles.
Right.
There is that work, and I think that that's absolutely. I think that there is a perception, and to Dwayne's notion of optics, but also just not just the optics, but the reality of having voices participate here that is different than participation in committee.
Well, that's what I meant. So they're participating on the committee because we have focused thing, there's real work. And then they're at this table as part of our committee piece. In other words, I'm saying they're here with us for those pieces. Now, whether we want to also have advisors, which I also agree might be at this table that are more broad, like workforce or some of those other things. But we can use this meeting, I believe, to have regional voices here. But it's in context maybe to the committee work that they care about and they're doing. I don't know. I get where you're going. It's just,
I think the question I think we're challenged with is, got the committee thing, I think it works. The policy questions on how we advance it, we need people. I'm not saying Salam would come to this, but if we had someone of a very high elevation within the Department of Education here to kind of react with us, they either buy into what we're trying to accomplish, they're participating in the conversation.
Salam's representative, Ben Cannon's representative.
Some of those people, for a purpose of integration and advocacy and scale, that might be a different effort just to get those key players at the table. Now, will they participate? The question. They're advisors, so are they sitting at the table? Or are they sitting in the room? That's all logistics. I think they sit at the table. I sit on the Global Warming Commission, and we have agency heads that sit at that table that are non-voting members. They're ex officio members. They sit at the table. They represent that. And so I think having a few of those key people that implement and cause change at this table as ex officio members, as advisories, would be helpful. But they're political. They're people who can make things happen at a policy level that would be helpful to help advance our discussion.
And alignment. Much faster alignment.
Yes.
Much faster.
So I'm a total advocate of that.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Okay.
I'm only trying to anticipate why is it that they're here and our regionals and folks aren't necessarily here in that structure.
Oh, that's good messaging handled.
So they're coming in, they are at this table, but they're coming in because they're working collectively on each of our subcommittees. That's where our regional, that's where our teacher voice is. And I just wanted to think about that messaging.
That's right.
Because we need as much.
I mean,
yeah.
It sounds like we're trying,
We're solving multiple things.
Can I say things out loud?
Yeah,
Sure.
All right, because there's a lot happening in here right now.
The coffee's starting to work.
Yeah, caffeine is kicked in, sugar's starting to work. Don't follow any of my tactics. It sounds like we have some strategic skills gaps here, right? Like we're missing some strategy partners, whether it's within the Department of Education or whether it's within the schools and the districts. Right, so, and I mean, I've sat on a number of groups like that too, where they're not a voting member, but they come, they represent, they hear all the things that we hear as sitting members and voting members of whatever it is you're on, and then you can align quickly, you can have a quick sidebar, and things happen. It's just the pace is much faster.
Yeah, that's right. Get the alignment.
Or you can have some of the conflict out sooner. You can have this sooner. So I think that's a good thing, but it seems like we need some strategic help as a separate thing to this. In other words, what should, and I might be way in the weeds here, but what should our strategy be of how to roll this out? What's the first priority? What's the second priority? Where are you going to have the fastest bang for your buck? Where are we going to be effective first? Is it committee? Is it to say, is it message? Is it storytelling? I don't know, right? Because I'm still so new to this group, I'm trying to think strategically. It's like, okay, where are we at here? Where are we missing pieces? It seems like we have some gaps, right?
Yeah, what problems are we trying to solve?
Well, and there's parallel work happening at ODE
right.
and at the HEC. The HEC strategic plan actually aligns very, very nicely to the STEM strategic plan.
Sure.
There's a lot of overlap, and yet we don't have formal structures in place to encourage that, cross-pollination between the HEC's conversations and the conversations happening in this body. We know that there's some crossover with Kimberly Howard, who's a wonderful partner and a member of the state board. There's state board members who are also very, very interested and advocates for this work, and yet we don't have them at the table as an ex officio.
Industry association. I mean, right? The tech association's a huge supporter of GTE and STEM, right? You look at the CCB folks, right? The contractors are huge supporters of CTE. And so, I mean, we all want the same thing, right? And we, in the generalized we here, right? So, but strategically how to align us, I don't know how to solve that. It seems like we need some help there.
So the question really, I think, is who would we want at this table to have include in the conversation to speed the advocacy, to better integrate with what the systems are, and let's get a few of those names that could be ex officio members that we'd say these are advisory members that we're adding to the council as ex officio members and advisors, and they strategically, and the committee stuff, we agree that
in addition to
the committee advisory, so that's a different level.
You have a whole list
So
of stuff we have
clearly, as we think about the name, someone from the Department of Education needs to be there. I mean, I think that
For sure.
yeah, that's absolutely a critical role.
Yep.
I think higher education needs to be there. It'd be nice to have on a consistent basis, and I'll throw this out there, someone from the legislature as the key champion, either of the Senate or the House, in terms of the key champion for education here, to at least be a part of that conversation.
Representative.
We don't have a CTE mandate per se, but it's a pretty important part of in terms of integration. Portland Tech Association.
So in this thinking, I'd like to point out that we're now talking about a lot of people's time, and I think like a counting crow, I can't think beyond 3 in these types of issues, these type of engagement. So what are the 3 things that people would be coming to these meetings for, and making the best use of their time? In fact, having them believing that showing up at this meeting is the best use of that segment of their time in their day, right? So we might like Ben Cannon to show up, but Ben Cannon's got a million things and he's oversubscribed. So why would he come to this meeting, or why would he send one of his people to this meeting? Well, so when we talk about the importance of, STEM and CTE in the, in the economy, and how we talk about it in terms of jobs, there's a conversation around that that's very important. Okay, and he has a role in that. So, I guess I'm thinking from that perspective, and to recognize that those folks aren't going to show up most of the time anyway. Okay, so, when we had people in the governor's office on our small business advisory council, we had people, in industry, they would show up at the times when there's something they really cared about was there, but the rest of the time their seats would be empty. and they might send somebody, but they'd really rather you just send them like a bulleted report on a document that says, here's what you need to know. So, when we're talking about getting people involved, especially for people statewide, let's be cognizant of what it really takes to participate in these types of things and recognize that people don't have to be at every meeting, so you could say that we had, and this gets down to us being, clear in our format, we know how the grant process works. We know when the grants are going to be coming out. We know what leads up to that. So there may be opportunities for people to step into our process, whether it's an advisor or something else that we call them, to participate in key steps in that. So it's like, we don't need you in the whole meeting, but that we fund, that's one of our three things. We fund these programs. Okay, so you need to be involved in that. Why? Because you're going to be responsible at some point, possibly for funding how this thing moves forward. Okay, so we at the strategic level are setting the expectation that somebody is going to be paying for some of the work down the road that we're actually kicking off right now, and that they're at the table to actually understand what that's going to look like. And that creates the reason for them being in that seat at that time, at those meetings, doing particular types of work. So, on one hand, I don't like to be prescriptive about how our process works, but I think we may need to, and we need to understand the ask to particularly busy people, and, be cognizant of their time and the value of their time.
So I would propose from an agency perspective that the agencies that are most aligned to this work and have investments that are very complementary to the work, certainly the Department of Education, and in particular career technical education. We may want to look at a double there, because there's other, as you know, within K-12, there's the applied learning, and there's some more of the formal, areas of math and science. So we may look at crossover there. There's the HEC. So having that representation here, particularly those individuals who are working in the areas related to this. Employment Department, who's working with the Workforce Board, and YDC, the Youth Development Council, who is working with a lot of the underserved youth and youth who trying to prevent dropout prevention, and community-based organizations and the support of those. Those are, to me, are sort of the four agencies. I think legislative representation is critical in order to get that advocacy and support, and to understand our work more deeply, and to contribute that legislative perspective would be invaluable. Beyond that, I think there's philanthropy that has also been part of our alignment, to try to get alignment of philanthropic contributions alongside of the public contributions that are being made here. So those, I think, are potentially the kind of organizational pieces, right, from an agency or constituency group in that regard. And then I believe that there's, I missed out of school time, because I think that's an important one. And then there's the field perspective, and whether the field perspective exists only through the committee, or to have their voices at this table, I think to be really, really valuable and important, particularly the STEM hub. Yeah. I think selecting a grantee or potential grantees becomes problematic in terms of advocacy and for their own particular programs, but they could and should participate in the committee structures, I think, around particular problem areas.
The only thing about the hubs, I think they're already convening in their normal settings.
Sure.
And so how do we just leverage those meetings to get the information we need from them versus having to bring them to the table? We probably need to have a very strong liaison to the hubs, like your meeting in September 21st, sure, where they are giving us feedback on the process. Because you put one person at the table, they'll all say, well, why did they get the seat at the table? And
well, I think that the hubs actually can, I mean, they work really well together, and I think that they could nominate a leader. What I'm concerned about is for me or the Department of Education to be a filter to this body.
Yeah, no.
That to me is not a structure that really, I'd like to not have that.
But a council, not that we want to obligate the council member, if we had a council member that was the liaison to the hubs, that goes to the hub meetings and acts as that. Now, you could always nominate them to your central hub meetings, but that's a big commitment of time. So that's negative of that.
But yes, we would love to have, so this is a separate issue. Highly encourage every single council member to participate in your local hub governance and meetings. So let me put that on the record. We also have, just as a proposal, is that two hub leaders are participating in a national effort to build leadership within STEM ecosystems. So the STEM ecosystems project that's actually quite substantial, and Oregon was one of the initial cohorts, have selected 2 members from the Oregon hubs to participate in a very small group around leadership and capacity development, and they would be perfect to be on this. Those are Whitney Swander from the Bend region and Melissa Dubois from South Central Salem.
The executive directors.
And so they would, I mean, having their capacity and their voice at this table would, I think, be extraordinarily beneficial.
Then it's just a matter of, to Dwayne's point, is the structure of it. You front load the meeting, you say, okay, we are requesting that you're here for the first hour. And that's your commitment, so you just get your feedback on that, and afterwards, then it's committee, it's reports from people we've awarded and so on. You can limit that so they know that it's not a 3-hour commit or whatever.
Yeah, or this meeting is going to be focused on this area, right? So we let them all know, here's what we're doing on the agenda. Would love to have you here at this particular meeting because we're doing this. So
let's do this, because I think we got lots more. Let's have, Mark's got a lot of input here. I think he's got some of the key about it. Right, talk to Lindsay. Let's see if we can structure this with a specific, here's what we need and why we need it. So there's a clear ask of why they need to be here and the type of people we're looking for.
And length of commitment.
Right, length of commitment. And then get that back out to us to review via email. And Mark can also talk to Lindsay about it. And then we'll see if we can collectively kind of circle around this as some type of action that we would create ex officio members at this table to help us with the work we have ahead of us. Okay? All right.
Nicely done, Chair.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about committees. I know it's not on here, but I think committees fit in this nicely in terms of activity that we need to complete. Yeah. I still fundamentally see a need on the metric side. I think we started down a pathway. We made some great progress. We still have our obligation report, our progress against the goals that we were asked to track. And so I think we do need a data and metrics committee, and we need to staff that with the right people again, just to make sure that we have a work plan. And I think we made great progress, but I think it just with everything else going on, we weren't sure we were going to exist. We weren't sure that we would get funded and all this other stuff, but I think we need to get that committee.
Jim, on that, it would be nice to refresh who's on our data.
We need to rebuild the committee and see who has interest, and we also, as we fill out the council with the remaining members to charge.
Well, and I love leading it, but I'm also happy with our new members of the council if somebody would like to take that on.
Yeah.
I don't need to own that.
Well, let's get the 2 or 3 committees I think we absolutely need, and then we'll figure out how we staff them. So clearly a data metrics committee.
What other committees do you think?
Well, we before we had a strategic plan. We don't need to do that. Nope. That's done. I think the advocacy.
That would be helpful.
Advocacy and communication, I think, is really a critical need, and we didn't make much headway on that one because I think we didn't have a strategic plan at the time, and so we were kind of like waiting for the cart before the horse. But I think now advocacy and it needs to be advocacy and communication needs to be a committee.
Yep. And at a previous council meeting, we also stood up an equity committee, but we never launched it and have not met.
What if the equity committee, just for thought here, it would be nice to have some subcommittee focused on STEM Hub overall progression and innovation that's happening, right? So it's going to feed into the advocacy communication group. It'd be nice to have one or two members of our group that really prioritize thinking about, maybe it's the equity committee, right? Thinking about how our STEM hubs are working from an equity perspective, and the second bonus we get is they'll know things we want to highlight.
The hubs equity crossover,
Yeah.
in terms of, are we meeting the needs from an equity perspective? Are the hubs meeting the needs from an equity perspective?
So is that part of the data and metrics work to try to capture those figures? Or are we talking more of a working committee of equity to mobilize structures regionally, or connect to broader advocacy work are focused around equity?
Yeah,
It's the latter.
it's the latter.
Right.
It's the data and metrics
Definitely
committee
the latter.
work with that committee to say, okay, can you feed me numbers? And messaging, communication, advocacy, can you feed us stories?
Right.
And so we need that piece to know either one of those.
And one of the things that we put out as a key priority within the STEM education plan, establish these peer support networks around, industry employees of color and women to reach, those groups across the state. So that could be the focus of an equity committee, and to ensure that those voices are participating, and that goes back to another.
And the hubs are thinking strategically about how they're engaging their communities from an equity perspective too, in terms to make sure that we're learning where the best practices are and what they're doing. So I think part of Mark's idea is really, maybe it's these three committees are the right ones. Maybe we can think of that. I think that's probably about all we could probably tolerate. The idea is to have every other month. So we have a committee, we'd have a council meeting one month. The next month would be focused on committee meetings, followed by so we wouldn't have committee meetings, council meetings every month, but every other month, and the committees would work within that period of time to really continue to advance these discussions and keep it, and then we would report out those committee reports in these meetings.
Assistant equity and inclusion is the third one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I think about each STEM hub individually is thinking about equity, and part of our, the criteria for the grants is for them to report on it. But I can envision the subcommittee being that overview of all of them.
Sure.
Because some of our areas of our state have a very different percentage of different groups, and
I say that committee in this specific instance calling in the hubs to say, tell me about what you're doing on it, what's working, what's not working, and how are you approaching this issue, and is your community getting traction, and all those questions.
Were things happening outside of that, right? So yesterday there was a first one we've had in our county it was a programming, how to create programmers as a committee of how does industry and education and the public at large come together to create programmers. And the whole conversation, we were surprised. The speaker was a woman she was at the U of O, which we didn't realize she had the resources right in town. It was sort of embarrassing. Who wrote this programming book that we all use, right? So here she is, wrote the programming book that we all know, all of our structures based on within my industry segment. And here she is at U of O, 3 miles from where our offices are, no one is aware, right? But her whole point was that if we don't focus on equity, we're just going to be training the same types of people to do the same types of jobs we've been doing over time. We're not really changing anything. And to come back to what you said earlier about change, right? And so if we're going to talk about change management, and it more than any of these three, from my perspective, change management would come into the equity and inclusion category, right? So if we're not looking through that lens, she said, look, you're going to be you've just put, to use her phrase, paint on a pig, right? Because you're basically the same thing we've been doing, and equity is the only way to actually have effective change, which was...
Let's be honest. I mean, equity is in everything that we talk about and we do. I don't have to think about equity because I bring it everywhere I go, and we love it to be that everybody does that, but it's very easy not to. And, that's one of the opportunities that the equity inclusion group would have, is to continue to bring that conversation, all the work. But I can also tell you it's an opportunity for people in the community to engage in a way that they would not if the group did not exist. So case in point, there is a North-Northeast STEM coalition that is mostly made up of people from communities of color. And they're not part of any of the hubs right now. And, you know, and some of it's intentional because they actually would like to impact all the different groups that are doing this STEM work. So the process by which we not only have our own conversations, but create opportunities for other folks to engage, I think is going to be very good. And I think that group would be very, very important.
Can I have a quick question on committees? So are the committees, this is ignorant on my part or not remembering correctly, are the committees, do the committees of this council have to be made up of council members?
Not, well.
Can we have community members or members at large or?
Oh, yeah.
Fill out a committee with people outside of this.
We need at least one person from the council to be
on
on
the
the committee.
Right, but you can fill out your committee with.
We've always had.
We had 2 of each of us on each of the committees, and then we had between 5 and 10 people that were community that really helped us.
You're able to have that partnership.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
That's right.
Okay, some organizations don't allow that.
No.
Okay.
Nope, absolutely. They become advisors.
But they're on the committee.
I do want to put forward 2 just reality checks on these committees. A, they are public meeting laws, so we post and require
minutes and
well the same formality or a recording, and then individual capacity to manage and sustain committee structures and work alongside the work of the council itself at a time when the capacity, certainly within the Chief Education Office, is minimal. So I just want to have that as a reality check. I think this is the right thing to do, and I'll do everything I can to support that work. It will require great leadership for the chairs of those committees to determine agendas and to help with the communication and just really keep things going on the committee. So I just want to make sure that that reality is in the room. I think that these are fantastic committees. I'm really excited by equity and inclusion. We'll need to, knowing that there's a number of other equity groups active in the state around different things within K-12 and post-secondary, we will need to think about how we differentiate and integrate that work, you know, in terms of its charge. We don't need to do that, I think, here, but we do need to do that.
Are the committees for the benefit of the council, or are they for the benefit of ODE at large? I'm confused.
Say that the committees are a form of how the council is contributing to the implementation of the STEM education plan.
Right. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe for perspective, the Data and Metrics Committee the first time around was focused on getting actual statistics and baseline so that when we talked about how we saw the STEM hubs impacting things we were advocating funding for, we could say, here's the lay of the land, here's what we plan to, and then to Jim's point, we do owe a follow-up report now based on this, that we're making progress. So it makes sense to, you know, redefine data metrics now for our reporting, our communications. Yeah.
Right, and then proceed with the same formality.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
We take 5 more. We're going to need to move on, and we'll have a follow-up at the December one. It would be timely for the engaging business community.
I think this is a great discussion. I've got 2 big pieces here that we need to get done, and I think we clearly have to continue monitoring our investments. That's obvious, and we need to put our report together for the legislature in December. I think getting the committees together and having them agree on a structure and getting leadership in those would be the next thing to do, and that'd be a good thing to do in this interim period through October to get those staffed and get things structured. So I think this is a great conversation and obviously good things that we can accomplish. And I think the committee structure is the way to do that. You can have more targeted, focused discussions and getting those committees together to agree on what they want to accomplish and then reporting back to see if we have alignment is the right answer. So
we'll get you a proposal around ex officio members.
Right.
Participating.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next item. And Mark will fill that up, comment, see where that all goes. Next item is really the computer science project update. And you got, yeah, I think that's that's going to go into because of time, I think that'll go to the committee. We can go to advocacy and communication. We had a nice, rich conversation about that earlier, and obviously that has more work to do. We didn't have any speakers to that right now.
And I know there's been conversations already within the STEM and CT Employers Coalition, but some of the things that we brought up around shining a light and mobilizing the business community, I think should be part of
it would be nice, and maybe I'm asking is maybe we could have Salam or someone from the Department of Education at our next November meeting, just to have this conversation around how he sees it fitting. We'll have hopefully some couple new members by then, and just to get a sense of we're going down this path. How does he see it coming, and how could we be helpful? And maybe maybe it's Lindsay, maybe it's Salam, but I'd like to at least, I think we need to hear from him on the work we're doing and how it fits.
Okay.
Great. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Best way to find things out is to ask the person who's in charge, you know? All right, thank you. All right, let's go on to the next one. Andrew, you're up.
Yes. Hello.
Andrew and Terrell.
Terrell, yeah.
And Denise.
Denise, come on. Come on up, Denise, if you want to sit at the table. Oh, you go.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
Sit right there.
Well, good morning. Mark said I have. Andrew, my colleague Andrew is on the speaker. He's remote today. We're going to push through this and give you some data. The PowerPoint that you have in front of you, or that you have on your handouts, there are some updates, very interesting, and we're pleased to data from, but stories can tell truth. So newly elected Representative Vile came to the Sherwood CTE night last January, and I invited him. I hadn't met him, and said stop by the high school. We were doing a promotion for our 8th graders and trying to get students to become more aware of what's being offered at the high school. He says, great, I'll be there. He came in and said a couple words to me. He said, really, T. Smith, I don't necessarily want to talk to you. I want to talk to your students. Show me a student that's in school only because of CTE programs. So I says, well, Carter's right over there, and he's setting up his little site. He built a computer, and so he was very proud of it, and Carter was there. And 30 minutes later, Mr. Vile came to me and said, you know, that's why I came. And Representative Vile, over the last, since he was newly elected, this was just January, has used that story to promote ideas of CTE programs at the legislature. So when you ask, how can we get there and who can we influence, you know what, we can. We have stories. We have truth and examples of how that can happen. John Hellkamp, administrator at Sunset High School. I'm shocked that that a high school in Oregon has 3 computer science teachers. And that is, you know, that's a great model. So John Hellkamp came to the our symposium at PSU this last June, and I was very interested in what he had to say because he wasn't proud that he had 3. He said, this is a challenge, actually, because I have 12 algebra teachers. That means I'm a quarter of the way where I want to be, to the point of, because he's this high-pay, high-demand careers, he knows. When we talk about influencing the influencers, influencing the decision-makers, John Hellkamp cannot get away from me now because I am going to use him as we speak to COSA and OSBA, as we influence other administrators, because OCSDA has been training teachers. We've been training the workforce, but we haven't been able to influence the decision makers. But we want to, and we're going to. I'm president, but I am a lame duck because Andrew, who's on the phone today, is going to be taking over the reins of Oregon Computer Science Teachers Association in early October. And so he's going to maybe weigh in here if I can give him any space to, oh, by the way, I'm not demonstrating good teaching methods, as Laura indicated. sometimes teachers shouldn't be a stage on the stage, and so I don't necessarily do that in my classroom, but I'm going to talk really fast to try to get it done in an hour.
20 minutes.
Public comment now down to 15, 14.
So we're going to move this quickly. We have a great group of leaders.
Just kidding.
We have a great group of leaders. So I will be staying involved in future grant management. So we're going to keep our leadership, but we're going in place. We're going to expand our board of directors to include our regional liaisons around the state. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I included some. And we're not going to. I don't want to admire the problem. I don't have time to do that. But we all know why we're here. We have the same mission. We have the mission of giving opportunities to students to get on the high-pay, high-demand career path, education path onto career path. And our mission is like your mission. And we have used this high-pay, high-demand career phrase over the last 4 years because it's significant. You all know that, and that's why you're on this council. I couldn't find an E. We had excite, educate, empower, employ. I couldn't find an E for administrators, so I just said we just need to work with them. That's kind of a new mission that we have, as we realize that things don't happen in a school or a building or a district unless the decision makers have the mission, have the dream, have the passion.
I would suggest that you put the word equity in there too.
Interesting. You know what one of the biggest equity challenges that Sherwood High School has it, Sunset High School has it, Wilsonville does not. So that's really an opportunity and an equity challenge. And so, yeah, it even goes. I love to hear that it was someone commented from ODE that it was a gender. The gender issue was part of the equity thing. And disabilities, that's awesome, because let's expand that idea of equity. It should be what we all think about all the time. Oh, keep going. Now, here we go. These are the new numbers. We reached 585 unique teachers this summer and 30,000 students. Let's take that grant for $750,000 and divide it by 30,000 students. That's $25 a student. Is $25 per student to influence a student and give them a chance? Is that a good ROI? I think it is. These are the teachers. 60% of our were first-year teachers, and almost 80% first 2 years in our program. We were very excited about that. They're CTE certified and/or they're 44% of them, if they're not, are going to work on their CTE certification. So these are new numbers.
Are you working with these teachers to get Measure 98 dollars too, in terms of? Are you working with these teachers to get Measure 98 dollars?
We're trying to educate them. Well, what's happening in Measure 98, and I have it down, and you may have read the slide, is that administrators are making the decision for how Measure 98 monies are being spent. We're going to try to influence those administrators to make sure that money is moved into developing CTE programs as the measure. Basically, they advertise the measure as that.
Yep.
But it appears, well,
I mean, it's also part of your plan.
It is. It's in our plan. We are going to definitely push for that. Very high satisfaction for our workshops. We're all over Oregon, Ontario, Bend. We had a really nice workshop over Ontario. Our Bend workshop is quite significant, and we're doing a lot of work in Eugene. Our regional liaisons, we're going to expand that, solidify that, so that we have people on the ground. Not only are they doing the work for OCSTA, for CF education in the regions of Oregon, we're also going to use those people as part of our leadership and decision maker for our organization. Now, you have this handout, and I inserted into the slides. This is what Mark came to a meeting with us the other day, and we kind of noodled this down to do in the future. That we kind of took some of the power efforts and successful efforts that we had over the last 2 years, and we're going to move forward. Plus, we're adding a few things without getting too far away from the mission of getting computer science and engineering into our schools. So, please insert any questions, because now I have about 7.5 minutes. But the outcomes are what we're going to focus on, because it doesn't matter. This is what I struggle with a little bit. I can be the best teacher, but if my students don't learn, I'm not effective. I mean, how is best teachers defined? And you as business owners, you're defined by your product. You're defined by the services, that how people respond and how effective your services are. We as educators, we're going to pay close attention to our outcomes. So we were asked to reach 400 teachers. We reached 585. We think we exceeded. So this number 2 goal talks a lot about the curriculum, the standards, and essentially it can be distilled down to the playbook. And I can send you a copy of that. The playbook is already well established and a great base, and we're going to do more with it in this next cycle. The idea of using the CTE structure as a base for improving and the career path funding that's available to schools and the 98 monies, it's all kind of coming together. And we also, one of the things that you have been talking about is why can't we have everybody, I think that question was, Jim was speaking to it. I don't understand the culture, Jim says, why don't we just all do it? But we're Oregon. We're a local controlled state. And we're very proud that locally we get to decide what goes on. But Oregon also, 98 is a state mandate for all of us to do something. So we'll work with any agency to help build a statewide initiative for computer science education at the high school level. Why not? Why not try? It's happening in Chicago. It's happening in New York. It's happening in other states. And we can use those models to push those issues. I went through some things of, administrators can be our obstacles in one sense, but they are also the decision makers, and like the John Hellcamps of the world, he's on fire. So that's an opportunity. I see it both ways. This study we've used as a rationale for going hard and fast after programs in schools, and you've probably seen it. Hard, don't like, because it really sheds light on their desire and push. Once they see it, and those are the things that I communicate to them. You know what? You decide, but you get to decide. That's an opportunity for you and for your students. The local control state, I already talked about. 98. I'm experiencing what's going on with 98. I'm a full-time computer science teacher at Sherwood High School, so I know what's going on there. I know what's going on nearby, and I'm from my colleagues. This is what's going on. But the good news is that 98 has sustainability. Therefore, what we learn and what we can do, it is an opportunity. Boom. Bam. So now I talk fast. Andrew, weigh in, and please ask questions.
Just a question. How are you working with the hubs?
So hubs are regional. We have regional liaisons, computer science liaisons in the area. So the two things that they're required to do is make a better connection with STEM hubs and the CTE coordinators in that region. And our CTE coordinators are waiting for us to build the base so that we have to start the programs and get them to have a certain amount of momentum before the CTE coordinators can come in and help get those established. And the STEM hubs have a bigger mission than just computer science, but it is significant, and we will be, and this is what we tell them, we will be the PD for the T&E, the Center of STEM. So we can do that professional development in those areas.
How likely is it that a math teacher in a high school could become a computer science teacher as well? I ask because in our county that's been suggested by principals. You've heard that over and over again, and that's who showed up. The externship program was not CS, it was English teachers and math teachers. What is the probability, talk math to me, that they can transition?
87%.
Why?
Because they are good teachers. they are
less about the content and more about teaching to learn.
So let's go back to what this is not all about me. So when I go to my classroom, I don't get paid because I know a ton about computer science. I get paid because my students are going to learn a ton about computer science. So you put a good teacher, you train a good teacher and add content, knowledge. You don't have to run them through a 4-year computer science program at University of Oregon. But what they can do is come to our workshops and learn about the curriculum and learn how to deliver it and learn about the open source resources for delivering content through the wire. And we believe that good educators, good teachers that know pedagogy and know students can learn the curriculum in a short period of time to be able to deliver. So one of the metrics that I kind of blew by here is that 38% of our teachers were our trainees this last 2 years were math teachers.
And I've heard that in communities where some local software experts will partner with the classroom, that's making teachers feel confident to try.
Yeah, we have co-teaching in the Springfield School District. Springfield Unified is absolutely on board with it. It's just curiosity because we were surprised that they had no CS background and they wanted to know how to program, right? And they come from language arts.
I will have that phone call with them because I'll tell them that you're a good teacher. You're 3/4 of the way there. I can hand you the curriculum. I can give you the turnkey curriculum. Let's roll. So we got to get the math teacher and the principal to say, let's try one.
This comes back to, I was just to close my thought, it comes back to something else about teaching people how, someone else said about, it's teaching kids how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Is what I hear. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think there's certainly that. I think that's an element. I think we also have to be recruiting those teachers, and I would push that the math teacher is the most logical choice on this for a number of different reasons. Having been a former math educator in a high school, many of my colleagues would find this a very foreign subject. I think there's an opportunity for many of our CE teachers who are steeped in application and understand how technology gets applied. That's a critical place, whether it's in CNC routing and machining or robotics. That's a natural affinity. I think we could look at those science teachers who are using technologies, probes, and gathering data, who also then use CS to complement the data and analytics. I think there's a number of places, and so I wouldn't just jump to assume that most math teachers could do it. I would love more math teachers because that would get math teachers to apply mathematics. But I see it, the benefit being a reverse in that area.
Many of them had a programming course in college in their coursework, so that's logical. But science teachers too. But I would my Spanish teacher might, I'm not going to teach forever, so I've been talking to my Spanish teacher, who's a high-tech guy, and he would like to. So we're not going to silo it. We need teachers. I think it was mentioned before. We're going to need, if we're successful with 98 and what we do, we've got to have some more teachers. So I'll close with this story. You said Lake Oswego. Lake Oswego High School has not had computer science till a week ago. Wow. And so we've been coaching them and starting it. And so they have 2 courses now taught by, and he came in and says, I don't know if I can do this. Yes, do this. And so we've stayed in communication, but he's now excited about it. We'll see. They're gonna, and Lake Ridge just started one too. And these are school districts that you would think probably should have. So we had the Lowell High School started, Newburgh High School, Marcola High School. A number of Eugene schools are doing this through the initiative with Carlos out of Northwest Lane County ESD. Westview High School, you would think, right in Intel's backyard, just started an in-school program. They've had a robust out-of-school program. Mountainside High School, the new high school in Beaverton. My friend Rick Danker, who's job shadowed with me out of industry, talking about where we're going to find these people. He retired out of industry and came and job shadowed a couple of us, and then got his teaching degree for 18 months at the University of Portland and got the job at the new high school in Beaverton. So we're getting it done. It's happening. New programs are being started, but basically this initiative, this drive by all of us is really just getting some significant momentum now.
That's good. Well, good progress.
Thank
Andrew,
you.
do you want to add anything, or are you good?
I'm good. I'm disappointed I can't be there in person, but I think T laid out just all the important stuff and did a great job there.
You guys are providing a very important role here in the state, and appreciate the work you're doing in advancing this. It's good to hear the successes we've had.
I also want to mention that T and Andrew are working with folks from the University of Oregon and PSU also on a CS for All grant.
And I might mention
National.
that TEALS is that program that put the industry person with the teacher to help support. So TEALS, you can talk to us about it. If you have a community of high-tech individuals that like to come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and work with a teacher and work with students to do Java, or then we'll help you set that up.
Great.
Charlie, you're running off, or do you have a minute when we wrap up here?
Well, Mark's paying me an extra hour to talk to you.
I just have a quick question for you after the meeting, if you have a few
Yeah,
minutes.
no, I'm going to be right.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we have one public comment sign up. Kimberly Herder, is she on the phone?
She received a message that she was having technical problems, but she sent this as her public comment.
Okay.
Okay, or Shabaka McKay, are you online and can be unmuted? Okay.
Yes,
Well, we have a link.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, wonderful. Do you want to do a very, very brief intro to the video?
Yes, it's a video out of a school in Reno, Nevada, and really it's talking about what we've discussed here today. How do schools, not only in the state of Oregon, but across the country, make connections with students to the workforce industry? And this is just an example of a school in Reno where they're utilizing Project Lead the Way and the idea of engineering to meet the demands of the workforce that is growing within the Reno area.
Roll it.
All right. I'm not entirely sure we're going to get volume on shot.
No.
There's no
I don't think we have speakers hooked up.
No, I don't think we're going to.
We'll send this link out
to all
of the
council members. Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll look forward to looking at the video. Clearly, you guys are
I'll send
having
that out.
some really great successes out there with the programs you're offering, so appreciate that. Okay. With that, thank you, council members, for participating. Mark's got a lot of things to do over the next month and a half or 2 months before our next council meeting, as always. But we can't say enough thank yous to Mark for the work he does. He's been a real champion for STEM and CTE and the integration of those two, and really appreciate his work on this effort. And without Mark, we wouldn't be where we are, and really want to appreciate
you,
you.
Department of Education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to the Department of Education. I absolutely agree. So thank you, and have a great day, and we'll be in contact by email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Great.
We'll have